She doesn't have a vote on it. So, and she really plays a role kind of removed from the board of directors. So I just wanted to mention that because she is technically a member, but she's a staff person. So she plays a role kind of like our staff do, except she actually sits there and is technically an ex officio member. In terms of this entire process, I think there's a lot at stake here, not only for United Council, but I think shared governance as a whole, there's a lot at stake. And I've been capable of, or I've had the privilege of sitting in on closed meetings and listening to everything that's going on. And I think that it would be a really good balance if someone from SSFC sat on this board as an ASM member, a part of the entire process through that. And then having sat on ASM, I went through the process of watching all of this happen and being affected by it as a student, as a member of ASM, as a member of Student Council, and being able to be part of that process. But also being able to hear the meetings that no one else is allowed to hear because they're closed session and they're about legal consultation. I think is really, really important. Sorry, I totally didn't even prepare anything because I forgot this was on the agenda today, even though I should have known. I think that there's serious concerns that are being raised about what could potentially happen if we open up this can of worms, right? Where we don't just have this opportunity to hopefully get more control over our segregated fees, but there's potential that they just get to take it away altogether, right? That's not something that's being noticed. And I think we need to recognize what's going on in this situation in order to make good decisions about it. And I've been privy to some of that knowledge, so I think it's really important that there would be a good balance of someone who is leadership in SSFC or potential leadership in SSFC and someone who is also part of ASM but has been privy to the knowledge that is being given to all United Council board members. In a lawsuit that could potentially have serious consequences for students as a whole, not just at this school, but across the state.
Representative Nyberg, do I have 4 minutes to speak to your nomination?
Sorry, I just wanted to clarify. On the steering committee, there is 2 ASM members, 2 members of the board. The president of the board is an ex officio member that doesn't vote, and then there's the executive director that sits on the board. And so that's just kind of the makeup of it. But I'll be honest, I've talked to the attorney and I are very close, and I've been invited to those meetings that are talking about the legal ramifications. As somebody who has studied this specific case for over a year and a half now, I can almost assure you we have a very solid, clear-cut case. And that's the reason why other schools in the UW system have not been able to access this fund for shared governance violations, because it's really important to ensure that you have done everything right. And I can assure you SSFC did everything right. This lawsuit should have happened 20 years ago. When I'm talking about, we're talking about shared governance and this Wisconsin State Statute 36095, that was put into place in the 70s. Before that, student activity fees pretty much encompassed anything that was outside of the classroom. So outside of your tuition was a student activity fee. And when shared governance was established, students got control over all of that those fees. And so from the 70s to now, there have been these policies from campus level policies in the early 80s and late 70s to then Act 20, which was the financial policy of system that first adopted on the allocation of student fees. And then in 2006 or 7, they made Act 50 because there were so many grievances. As we have seen in the past couple of months, from everything from off-campus space to contracts, I also spearheaded the campaign to even review and reform Act 50 with other key members of the United Council. I have very close relationships with members of the United Council. President Seth Hoffmeister and I have been meeting with President Riley for months now about this issue. And I can assure you that it's very difficult to repeal a Wisconsin state statute. A case in either circuit court or appellate court is not going to repeal a state statute. And I pretty much can't promise you, but I'm almost 90% certain if you don't win in circuit court, we'll win in appellate court. That even has more standing for the ramifications of this university will follow. Representative Chauvin and Avon is very excited to work on this stuff. I think it's really important to get somebody who doesn't actually even sit on ASM Student Council that's out of this room, kind of depoliticized. To be honest, he has relationships with recreational sports advisor. he's an employee for them, so we can talk about those grievances. And I think it's great that, there are members on this body that are on that are, sit on the board of directors for United Council, so that is somewhat of a conflict of interest, whose interests you're representing. And so I think it's really important for you to appoint myself and Jovan and admin to this, and what I'm gonna ask is that we motion to vote on the appointment separately. So, yeah.
Okay. Are there any questions for any candidates? One more candidate, anyone? Representative Wheeler.
Representative Vander, could you just clarify in what capacity you were privy to behind the closed door discussions of legal issues?
Sure. So last weekend, we had a board of directors meeting at the conference, and because all of our meetings are open records, and we wanted to consult with the lawyer that Sarah's talking about. We've been in relations with him, but we wanted to, as a group, we had to vote and make a decision on this committee and who was going to be in this committee and what it was going to look like, what their role was, and have a discussion about that. Because this has the potential to be like a lawsuit and like go places, it can be big, and we're fighting against administration, is what that would look like. We don't want that legal advice and that conversation can't be on the record because it can be used against us. So we go into closed session to have legal counsel, and we can't talk about it to a certain extent outside of it, because once we go into closed session, we have to keep that knowledge to ourselves. So I also don't know how much I'm allowed to say about it.
That's fine, you answered my question.
Okay.
Do you have a follow-up?
No, thank you.
Vice Chair Giannopoulos?
Have the people been appointed from the board of directors to this committee? Yeah.
Just everyone or just individual?
Yeah.
Michael, Mizikowski, and Andrew, and also, Jack Murray, who is the president of United Council of Ex Officio, and then the executive director.
Those who are supposed to still be ratified by the board, they've been nominated by the board.
Okay, do a follow-up? Okay. Secretary Camilo? Okay. Representative Gardner?
Yeah, I just have a clarification question with the appointment information first. Were the appointments split into two separate appointments?
Sure, so I guess we're voting.
Yeah.
Is that, I mean,
Or
in the
just
situation,
motion.
it would be a secret ballot where everyone gets two, you see the majority plus one once again, which means everyone would get 2 votes. So you could write down Betty twice, you write down Sarah once, you write down Joe twice, you do whatever you want.
When you go to the name points, you have to vote for 2 separate people. You can't vote for one person.
It's my understanding you can allocate your votes however you like, including 2 votes for 1 person. So, does that clarify?
That does. And then the second question that I had is just as far as the timeline. I don't know if I should direct this directly to Representative Nybert or, but when so this steering committee, when does it make a decision as far as how they're going to proceed, or when is its first meeting perhaps?
And that's kind of just depending on when you see confirmed the appointment, and also as we do, it should have happened 2 weeks ago. All of this information should have happened 2 weeks ago. In reality, it should have been probably a smaller group of people that was meeting, is because it's going to be taking a lot of conference calls. You really can't take any action until the board of regents confirm the budgets, because that is when you can say there has been incurred costs. And so all this, as soon as these are confirmed, then we can move forward that way.
Do you have a question?
Yeah. I kind of wish that that Joe Van Gerst, I can't remember his last name, would be here so we could ask, but I'll ask you instead. What do you feel qualifies Joe to be on this committee or perhaps other members? And what I haven't heard from him directly.
Yeah, no, I can tell you. So what I just did off of his involvement in recreational sports, also being on IT session and IT session. Another thing is I was going to request that Ellie Brooker, who's going to be running for SSC chair, be on it, but however, with like the time commitment of SSC chair the first couple of months, and her also being in DC this whole summer, I was worried that she would not be able to fill those abilities. So Jovan Abbott is running for the vice chair of SSC, and so things really quite
Representative Hewitt?
Yes, the other members of the United Council Board of Directors who are going to be on the steering committee, what institution do they attend? Are they their students?
Yeah, so they attend the college. There was the stipulation set up for the people sitting on the board. The way the United Council is divided and the Board of Directors is divided is into the three categories of institutions that we have in the UW system. So there's research institutions, which are UW-Madison and Milwaukee, and then there's colleges, and then there's comprehensives. So because ASM has 2 appointments to this committee, there were no appointments from research. So the 2 other members are simply comprehensives and college. There's an appointment from comprehensives and an appointment from colleges. So there's no one there that understands ASM and UC and the way they intricately work together.
Do you have a follow-up?
No. Thanks.
May I have information?
On point.
The president of the United Council is going to be an ex officio member of the body. Is he going to be going to Madison as well?
I will yield to you, but I believe it is, yes.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you. Jeremy Young?
Olivia, I was just wondering if you could speak to, obviously, I mean, the way I see this is that the only issue is with your appointment is a conflict of interest. And I was wondering if you could speak to how you're going to handle ensuring that you represent ASM and not United Council.
I think that's a really good point. And it's hard to me because the way that I know that United Council works in a much bigger capacity on a state level because it has the needs of different institutions as well. But I guess I can ensure there's no conflict of interest because the way that I utilize UC as a tool for students is because of my work on ASM, if that makes sense. So the way that I've used United Council in the past is, and why I recognize like the depth of this case, is because I've worked in the Capitol a lot and working with state legislators to work on issues that affect us as a body that, because we're students at an institution in the UW system, ultimately help other students as well. Do you know what I mean? So I guess in breaking that conflict of interest, I'm interested in the way that this helps students and that by default also helps students in the system. Does that make sense? It's not like UC's interest is my interest is ASM's interest.
Do you have a follow-up?
Yeah, it's more of a clarifying question. I'm confused. So you're saying you represent students as a whole, but I'm asking you how you're going to represent specifically the students of UW-Madison over students as a whole. You see what I'm saying?
No, I hear what
Because
you're
that's
saying,
the
and I'm saying I
company-
represent students of UW-Madison, and because their issues are the issues of all students by default. But I guess I'm curious in this process how, in taking the issues of ASM, it's not. I guess I don't see myself being put in a position to. Sorry, I'm being thrown off by the way you're looking at me right now. I'm curious what situations will be put in where someone will have to decide to either take UC's interest and ASM's interest. Because if ASM is the plaintiff on in this court case, UC's interest is ASM's interest. Because if ASM gets screwed over, they're screwed over because they're funding this entire thing. Do you see what I'm
Do you
saying?
have a follow-up question?
Yeah, just again, do you see how there's, I mean, I guess.
Just make sure it doesn't go into debate. Keep the question answered.
Yeah, no, I'm sorry. So my question is do you see, this is just, I'll phrase it this way, and my final question. Do you think there's a difference between the interests of students, of the associate students of Madison and the governing body of a school such as UW Parkside? Do you think there are differences in between their interests?
I do, but I also think there's significant differences in talking about credit transfer, in talking about tuition, in talking about flexibility and how much you want administration on that campus to be making decisions. But I guess I think the problem with this conversation is we're saying interest, and that's such a vague term that I'm kind of trying to figure out how to answer it. But when we're talking about a battle of F50, we have a greater stake in this. So I guess that's how our interest is different. But our interest is, everyone's interest is for us to win this battle on F50. And what I'm saying about UC is funding this. This is UC's money, and it has significant impacts on the organization to win. right? So that's why UC's interest and ASM's interest at this point are like thank you. Intricately, okay, I'm gonna go over that. Tied, because ASM needs to be successful for UC to be successful.
Thanks for working, man,
Are
appreciate
there
it.
further questions? Are there further questions from any of the candidates? Seeing none in the debate, any debate? Representative Nygaard?
I'm motion to divide the vote into two separate votes.
Second.
Okay, and into what, to clarify? Which-
So we're gonna vote for the first appointee, and then we're gonna take a vote on that, and then we're gonna vote for the second appointee.
Okay,
Separate.
so, Ben, my understanding what you were saying is that there'd be two votes, there'd be all three, you vote, the first, there'd be vote. Person, if one person's the majority, they're done, then you move on to the next two, and there'd be another vote between those two, and if the majority whoever gets that, receives the second seat on this committee.
Point of
So,
information,
point,
would the regular way we would do this is by plurality, like in our law, our guiding documents?
well, strangely, this has not ever been something we're gonna do a point to, so we're just gonna do it by the typical way that we appoint the committees, which is, well, the motion is to the majority, I mean, if you don't like, it, you can vote against it, obviously, anyone can.
Point of information.
Point.
Without that motion, it would be by default the way we usually conduct business, which would be plurality, right?
I believe so, yes. So, a bit of a motion and a second, would you like to speak to your motion, Representative Nygaard?
I think that since we're talking about, like, two seats on a board, and we have 3 people, I think it's only fair to take 3 separate votes on this, just in case that we want to debate them separately, or if we had issues on one candidate versus the other, and I think that it's just more fair this way.
Would you speak your second?
No, I agree.
Okay, if this is debatable, the points of debate, Representative Whitbanner?
I think that if we have 3 candidates, if someone doesn't think that one person should be on, but someone else thinks that a different other person shouldn't be on, but like, there's overlap, right? And I'm having a hard time explaining that, Jesus Christ. What I'm trying to say is, I think that we should do plurality for the same reason that it's in our guiding documents, so that if someone thinks that one person is the best person to be on there, but another person doesn't think at all, that balances out in plurality.
Representative Nygaard?
Motion to call the question.
Motion to call the question. Is there a second?
Second.
Any questions? All in favor of calling the question, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Question's been called. All in favor of making this a 2-vote system? A 2-vote system as opposed to just a 1 simple plurality vote. Please raise your placard. All opposed? That carries. So, on point.
And that's different than that, but I'm confused. So, does that mean that there are 2 elections for which the 3 candidates are the same?
It means we are effectively in the majority runoff for 2 different seats on the same committee.
Point of information. Does that mean that the winner of the first seat will not be eligible to run?
The second time, because they already have the 1 seat, yes. Is everyone clear on that? If not, please ask questions. Okay, so we are back in debate on these candidates. Representative Nygaard?
I motion, to close the debate and move into the first vote.
There's a motion to call the question in a second. All in favor of calling the question, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Question's been called. Here's the chair, I apologize. Question's been called. Okay, so if someone please write the names of the 3 candidates up there. I guess we could, ideally, there's a couple, explain this, why not? Because we could do this a couple different ways. We could preferably be secret ballot where everybody's 1 vote the first time. Just because it would be really complicated to call 3 different names out in a vote. So I really entertain that motion. Representative Gardner?
Motion to secret ballot.
Do you want to secret ballot? Second? All in favor of using a secret ballot, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, we'll use a secret ballot. Everyone will have 1 vote, so please write down the name of your first pick for the first seat in this committee. On what?
One name on the sheet.
Just 1 name on the sheet, yes. We get another sheet in a couple minutes. Any other points of information, anyone? Points? Okay, so the first seat will go to Representative Nygaard. We'll now move back into debate for the second seat on this committee. Representative Nygaard.
I truly think that Joe Van Maven would be a great fit for the committee. I think that from a community perspective, he'd be able to work with people very well. I think it will also ensure that there is a kind of carryover between one SSU and the next. I think that since I sit on this body, I can represent the student council interests, but I think that he will be doing a great job representing SSU.
Representative Hyde.
Yeah, I just wanted to say something quickly, because while state statute is hard to change, I've had plenty of conversations with legislators in the Capitol talking about how we need to tighten our belts and how people are going to have to make sacrifices. And this is when people were talking about limiting students' ability to allocate their own segregated fees. And it's really big terms like that make me worry about shared governance, because we're in a fiscal situation where something like shared governance and us allocating our own segregated fees can be seen as an inefficiency in our system by administration and people who don't necessarily understand like the deep underlying values of shared governance. So that's why I think that this decision is really big that we're making, that the steering committee will be making. So I just wanted to put that out there, because I do recognize that that's not easy. Even though California can like put amendments to their constitution on their ballots all the time, it's harder here. But it's definitely conversations that have been being had, and I've been watching them unfold. And then in terms of this committee, when I sit on the board of directors, I sit as a representative of the research caucuses, right? So I represent UW-Madison and I represent UW-Milwaukee. So in terms of representing the difference between a comprehensive and a college, I don't think that'll be a conflict of interest. I represent research institutions. And I think that our battle from ASM is something that I've watched and I don't like to say been a victim to, but been hurt in the process, right? Is something that we mentioned before. There are serious concerns that I have with I want to say JSSF groups, but they're not JSSF groups, right? Like UHS, there are serious problems that I have with these organizations, these entities receiving student money that I've witnessed and that I've been really interested in. So I don't believe that there will be a conflict of interest in me sitting on the board of directors. And representing ASM. Instead, I think that it'll be helpful in being able to communicate what's going on to members of the board, being able to translate what we're saying from ASM, and having that knowledge would be really helpful in making sure that this committee is cohesive and can work together.
Vice Chair Giannopoulos.
I would just like to speak to the importance of SSC members who voted down non-allocable budgets to be on this board. They had a plan all year to fight this primary responsibility case, and they know the reasoning behind all the things that they've done this year. On SSC, they work with the budgets of the allocables and the non-allocables, so I think it is very valuable to have someone who has gone through that very long process to make sure that the reasoning behind this case is upheld. So I would really urge you all to vote.
Representative Magallon.
Yeah, I'd like to yield my debate turn to Damon Terrell, a UW student and member of United Council.
Okay, are there any objections to yielding to Damon to speak?
I actually intended to come Monday and make myself available to answer the questions on this kind of thing, so that we didn't have to waste so much time at the beginning of this debate. But that didn't happen for various reasons. I think what I would like to say, if I were to do this, is that I don't see Joe Vandenavon in the room, and as a member of United Council, I've worked with Libby in the past. I can give her a thumbs up, and I want you all to know that I've seen Libby work well on this kind of thing before, and I want that to be very well known. But besides that, I just want to make sure that you all understand the dynamics of United Council. We all represent our standard schools. There's really not a division of interest. And the fact of the matter is we voted for $10,000 for this because we believe in what this is. I just want you all to very carefully think about what you're doing, because what I see is a bunch of partisan BS. Like, I can tell which one of you are on each side of every issue, and like what I witnessed Monday made me extremely nervous. This has been a dream come true for me to see this move forward. I have been pushing this F50 thing, like I really am excited about it, but when I see the example of governance that I saw on Monday, I know this body can be much better, and it does worry me when I see institutions like Waukesha, control your damn face, please. When I see institutions like Waukesha.
Point of personal privilege.
Point.
Can he please not direct
Can
comments?
everyone in this room please just remain respectful to everyone, and please refrain from the language.
This isn't the first time I've had that happen. I apologize. I should know that. My point is, I have been.
On point.
What was Monday?
Monday was the last time we
He's referring to
Tuesday. I apologize. It's usually Mondays. But I would really like you all to think very hard about what this is, but also think about why you think that. I think you can be better than I've seen. I really think you all can think individually and discuss things with each other respectfully. I think this body can be better, because I have worried about this ever since I saw what happened Monday, because we're not a great example of governance right now, and I am nervous that I just allocated $10,000 from a body that isn't guaranteed to exist. We're not guaranteed to exist like you all are, so please, I just would like to say that when we considered this originally, it was only 3 members. We bumped it up to give more representation to both sides, but I would like to see that bridge over. Yes, Jeff Murray will be, I believe, going here, but I mean, he's not here yet, so I would like to see somebody from this body that is living with United for the Chamber of Commerce in the past. But beyond that, I want this body to be better than it has been so far. So if you have any questions about what United Council is about, or what we do, or why this fund was established, or any of that, Sam can answer those, I can answer those, but we're here in the room and I've been trying to tell you about it. So please ask me if you have more questions, but I think you need to take time and actually consider this more than just use your phone in the room, please.
Representative Gardner.
Yeah, I just have a question that I think is incredibly relevant to what was just said. I'm not sure who directly to ask this, but what was Joe Vandenavon's involvement in the United Council last year? I don't know if Representative Nyberg, if you have a...
Joe hasn't had any real involvement in United Council. As they used to meet him, I spearheaded the F50 campaign that United Council made a top priority this year. So I guess that's...
Chairman Gallagher.
Can I move to call the question?
The motion to call the question, is there a second? Okay, all those in favor of calling the question, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, the question's been called. If everyone will stand, please pass out some more paper Everyone will have one more vote for you to be final seat in this committee. Congratulations to the second seat to SSU Representative Joe Van Aven. We'll now move on to 8.4, we removed it from the members, which is the student judiciary bylaws updates and improvements. So, Chief Justice White, you'll give the floor.
Okay, so obviously these changes are extensive and comprehensive, so I hope that all of you who have concern or questions about these changes have looked them over thoroughly and are prepared to ask detailed questions to address those concerns or comments. I've been working on this in some capacity for almost 3 years now. When I first started studying student judiciary, it's really hard to work with the bylaws that we currently have because they're disorganized, they're hard to follow, and they're incomplete in my mind. There are a lot of powers and responsibilities that are referenced to and not really explained, so this kind of is an effort to do that. Also kind of makes more official some of those responsibilities and what the SJ is accountable to. These were unanimously passed by the justices of the student judiciary, so I ask that to weigh heavily on your minds. I think that these are the governing documents of 6 individuals who all voted for them, and that if you don't have any specific issues with them, then I ask you to vote for them, because the people who will be working with these documents are in favor of them wholeheartedly. With that, I'm not going to go into a major summary of what's in here. I hope that all of you read my letter, and I do apologize that letter was written for a different group of people, so if there are things that you don't understand or it didn't seem like it made sense to be talking about that sort of stuff, that was because it was designed for the 18th session Student Council. But it does give a good overview of what's in the bylaws and why. And one thing I would like to note is that I removed the piece, because of the Chancellor's decision talking about viewpoint neutral manner bylaw changes, I removed a piece that clarified that for SJ's purposes. So there's no longer a piece in here that makes a distinction between procedural and viewpoint neutrality violations. All right, so with that, I'll open myself up for questions and encourage you to please, please, please vote on these as fast as possible. This is a major personal and professional achievement for me. If these don't pass before I graduate, I probably will cry.
Vice Chair Giannopoulos?
With all the time stipulations, with the different aspects of the judiciary, what will those time stipulations ensure?
I'm sorry, could you clarify?
Like, or turning in briefs or, things of that nature?
I'm not really sure what this question is getting at, but we have a set of timelines that require different documents to be turned in a certain fashion. And that assures that things move along, I guess. Does that answer your question?
Do you follow? Vice Chair Giannopoulos? Representative Navarette?
Yeah, so I understood that the chancellor has requested that you take the wording about the mutual manner out of the bylaws. And do you make that decision because of the mandate or because you actually believe it's true?
Okay, first of all, yeah, to answer your question, the chancellor didn't direct the student judiciary to change anything about the bylaws. The first version of these bylaws that I put to 18th session had a small clause that said something to the effect of, there's this bylaw that says a viewpoint neutral manner is procedural correctness and not taking a group of viewpoint into account. And from my understanding, this body will more likely than not remove or alter that bylaw in the future, and I thought it would be pretty dumb to have a piece that referenced that bylaw incorrectly to go into a document that I want to exist for a long period of time. Also, I think it was one of the more contentious pieces within these bylaws that a lot of people have expressed frustration with the student judiciary's particular interpretation. So both of the reasons that I believe the bylaw that it references will be changed, and also that I think that that's probably one of the source of people's major disagreements if I took it out.
Do you follow? Representative Buick?
Is there anything in here that you would say is like the most important change or the most important like goal to move forward successfully as a judiciary?
Yeah, I'll answer that in a couple different ways. One, the most important thing about these bylaws is they're much more fleshed out and comprehensive. So they hold the student judiciary accountable to certain responsibilities that are not being held accountable to right now. They're reorganized, which make them easier to work with for the justices primarily, but also for those who want to read them, because the current bylaws are not really in a logical order. In terms of specific additions or changes, I think that the most substantive change is the change outlining the referenda procedure, which will allow the student judiciary, that's like almost at that very end, that will allow people who want to put referenda on the ASM ballot to come before the student judiciary and have a conversation about what that language should be, and then have it approved. Because currently, the student judiciary can alter without the consent of parties' language that goes on the ASM ballot, and basically nobody can do anything about it. And I think that that's problematic for the people who work really hard to get their referenda put on the ASM ballot. So I think that there should be some sort of cooperation and contract amongst people who put items on the ASM ballot and the student judiciary that approves them. So that's probably the most substantive thing. The case brief policy is also implemented, which is not currently in the bylaws. Other than that, a lot of it is just expansion of what already exists.
Do you follow?
Would you like to comment on the case?
Okay, so before I was the Chief Justice, the student judiciary required only what we call complaint forms, which is like a one-page thing, asking you to categorize your complaint, identify petitioner and respondent, and gives no other information unless you add it. So it was really difficult for justices to look at this information and make decisions about the case, whether they were going to hear it or not, or whatever else is necessary to do before you hear the case. So when I became Chief Justice, I instituted a case brief policy. I wrote a template for parties to fill out and use, and it requires the parties to explain the legal issues which they want the court to specifically address, It requires you to give a summary of facts that apply to your case, and it has you summarize your arguments, basically. So it helps each side prepare, so both parties can come to the room knowing what the other people are going to generally talk about, and that's really important. But it also helps the justices prepare and know what questions to ask, so things move much more smoothly, and everybody's kind of more on the same footing in terms of what information they have, and that's really important, and it was never documented.
Do you have a final question?
No, thank you.
Representative Magallon?
Yeah, so, correct me if I'm wrong, are you saying that 5.054 special types of complaints, C, viewpoint neutrality complaints, is not going to be part of this? I wanted to clarify what you were saying earlier.
Right. So what you see in front of you in terms of the section that Representative Magallon just referenced, that is correct. There used to be, the original version that I put to 18th session had another piece in there that clarified the bylaw in section 2 of these bylaws that says that making a decision in a viewpoint neutral manner requires that decision be procedurally correct and that it doesn't take viewpoint of the group into account. And there was a piece in there that said something to the effect of, while procedural correctness is a component of the viewpoint neutral decision, a procedural error does not necessarily mean there's been a viewpoint neutrality error. And so that piece got taken out, like I said, to Representative Nygaard. One, because I expect that bylaw to be altered in the future because of what the Chancellor asked Student Council to do. And also because, personally, I never thought it was really appropriate for that to go in the bylaws because it's kind of like an interpretive or like interpreting other bylaws sort of thing, which kind of irks at me a little bit. And then also it was a more contentious piece. So taking it out, I hope will address people's concerns that the student judiciary is not trying to officialize things that are contentious.
You have a follow-up?
Yeah, so, and within it, specifically, C, viewpoint neutrality complaints 3, Roman numeral 3A, says that the student judiciary may forward the funding decision to the ASM Student Council if the funding body corporate is incapable of making a viewpoint neutral decision. And, just knowing that what it used to be, what it currently is that the student judiciary shall forward that funding decision to the student council. So I guess, given that, how does maybe this part or the whole bylaws that you're submitting maybe alter the relationship of power between the student judiciary and the student council?
Right. So I addressed this a little bit in the letter that I wrote to 18th session. So actually, what the current bylaws state is that if a viewpoint neutrality violation is found against the funding body, the student judiciary decision shall be delivered to the student council, who shall hear the request at its first meeting after the decision of the student judiciary. So that language, shall be delivered, implies that there's some sort of action or responsibility on the part of the student judiciary, and that is in the hands of the student judiciary. So the way that the justices have interpreted ever since I've been involved is that the student judiciary has to make an active decision to send a funding decision to the student council. And this is responsible precedent, and my letter explains why, but I'll briefly summarize. The student council, as we have, or those of you who have been watching over the past couple months, has a lot of responsibilities, and making funding decisions is a big load on top of that, and it's very difficult for a body that is trained to represent opinions to make viewpoint neutral funding decisions, because you all are here to make value judgments and to do it as responsible for your constituents. You're not necessarily here to look at a set of criteria and say whether a group should get funding or not, and the SSFC, that's what their purpose is. So in order for the student judiciary to consider sending a funding decision to student council, there has to be a problem so egregious on the part of the funding body that they can't do it, and that student council needs to do it. So this, in my mind, the way that it's written now doesn't change anything in terms of what the student judiciary does. And to my knowledge, the student council has never independently taken up a funding decision, except for recently in my interpretation of the series of events. And I don't think that it's appropriate for them to do so without the specific direction of the student judiciary because of the challenges that student council faces in making these decisions.
you have a question?
Yeah, I mean, I guess I would just say that whenever SSFC does recommend its budgets to student council, that is student council making budgetary decisions. So it is something that they do every year. I guess then, given that if the funding body does commit a mistake, however egregious or not it is, don't you find it problematic to then still remand that decision back to that funding body that made the mistake in the first place?
Obviously, I can't speak in general for all cases because we do address these issues on a case-by-case basis. And I think that that interpretive deference on the part of the justices is really important because you can't just have a uniform solution for, and I have this conversation with Nick Checker all the time, and he knows that I am very much against uniform solutions to problems because you can't generalize in that manner. So this bylaw, the way it's written, allows the flexibility for the justices to say, what are we dealing with? Is this something that will benefit everyone if it goes to a different body, or will it benefit everyone to remand it back? And that also has a really important part that's been elevated from the Student Judiciary Digest that says that the Student Judiciary can preclude specific individuals who are responsible for viewpoint neutrality violations from participating in that funding decision again. So if in general the great majority of that body made a responsible, good decision and they're trained and purposed to do that, then they should do that, and we can preclude the people that cause the problems.
Vice Chair Giannapolis?
I move to suspend the rules and take this piece of legislation off right now.
There's been a motion to suspend bylaw 3.044 and take this up as its first vote. Since it's a bylaw, it needs 2/3 vote at 2 consecutive meetings. So let's skip the whole just introduction part and go into the first vote. All in favor of suspending bylaw 3.044, please raise your placard. Opposed? That carries. We're still in question and answer. Vice Chair Giannapolis?
Close Q&A.
The motion to close question and answer is there a second? All in favor of closing question and answer, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? We're now in debate. The point of debate. Representative Nygaard?
I think it's imperative to pass this piece of legislation or these many pieces of legislation. I think the reason for that is because it's addressed many concerns and issues that arose in the session, and many of those issues surrounding why ASM session was not able to be effective in many of their everyday working and also their attending structure because of people not really knowing the rules, not really knowing kind of the powers of each branch and how kind of we function as a unit. And it's really important for ASM to move forward in our session and to be successful that we all understand these delineated powers and so we should be able to work up to its capacity and also be able to work within the system and not having to kind of engage in the power struggle that sometimes arises in student council and SSC.
Representative Nygaard?
Yeah, motion to amend.
Okay, you submitted to the secretary in writing?
I actually haven't, so
I can't accept the motion until it's submitted in writing, so. The floor is open for debate.
Pass.
Representative Nygaard?
Second.
Question been called, and there's a second. All in favor of calling the question, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
Aye.
With that, the question's been called. All in favor of passing the first time, the student judiciary bylaw updates and improvements, please raise your placard. All opposed? We will see this next week. Thank you. And we are now on to 8.5, which is elections bylaw updates and improvements. Chief Justice Petco, you have the floor.
Okay, so this is much shorter and simpler. The gist of the issue is that the way the certification is written down in our bylaws, in the election bylaws currently, is not reflective of the way that this process is operated for all of recent memory. And it's also, the way it's written isn't really the way it should be operated anyways. So this says that basically, it's just basically an expression of what goes on now and prevents the student judiciary from allowing people to be sworn in while they're still subject to elections violations, which caused, for any of you who were around last session, some major issues when the student judiciary tried to enforce a ruling after the respondents had been sworn in as representatives. So I agreed with everyone who said that you shouldn't be able to do this after they're sworn in, and I would like to make it so that can't happen anymore. Other than that, I'll take any questions on the specific changes. for the elections bylaws.
Floor's open for questions. Floor's open for questions. Seeing none, we're in debate. Points of debate, Representative Nygaard.
I think just for the same reasons we talked about piece of legislation, we can go ahead and pass this one, just to ensure that everyone is held accountable, also that we aren't overstepping our roles within the rules, and so that we're remaining consistent when we, while we are enforcing the rules to every individual that's involved in this organization.
The question of information.
On point.
Did we suspend the rules and take up this legislation already? Did we do that?
That should be novelist.
I'm going to suspend the rules and pick up this piece of legislation right now.
Is that all? Okay. Is there anyone to suspend the bylaw 3.044 in a second? All in, apologize, it's debatable, let's get something. What's your motion?
For the same reasons we did before, we should do it now.
But just your second?
Yeah.
All in favor of suspending bylaw 3.044, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? It is still suspended, and we'll continue debate. Chairman, I apologize. Chairman, McCann.
Okay, move to call the question.
So motion to call the question, is there a second? A second? Okay. All in favor of calling the question, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Question has been called. All in favor of passing introduction of new legislation 5, elections, bylaws, updates, and improvements, please raise your placard. All opposed? And we'll see this next week as well.
Thank you.
Okay. We're on to introduction to legislation 1, the event bylaw change. Appoint.
I move to take up the employment of the finance committee chair and limit the seat of position our governing board chair right now.
Second.
There's a motion to move into agenda again. Kelly, do you have a motion?
Yes, I believe that the candidates have been sitting here and waiting, and we should put their priorities above our own on this agenda, and we should elect them now.
Put your second.
I couldn't agree more. They've spent enough time in the interview processes and the other process of being hired to be on the board to begin with. I think we should get this done.
Okay, close over today. See none, questions been called. All in favor of moving new business 1 and 2 to be taken up immediately, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, we are in new business 1, appointment of a finance committee chair. The floor is open for nominations. Chair McNally.
I nominate Representative Andrew Kidd.
Second. Do you accept?
I accept.
Floor is open for other nominations. Floor is open for further nominations. Floor is not closed for nominations. Okay. Chair McNally,
I nominate myself.
Okay, that's fine. That works. You accept that, I assume. Okay. Perfect. Chair McNally. Okay.
I nominate.
Okay. Thank you. I apologize. And do you accept?
Yes, I do.
You accept? Okay. Thank you. Okay. Chair McNally, you have 1 minute speaking nomination of Representative Kidd.
I've gotten to know Andrew Kidd over the past month. He's a fabulous person. I really feel that he has the leadership skills, the strength, and the undergraduate degree to lead this committee. He hails from the very prestigious Notre Dame, but he has now joined us as a Badger. I think getting to know him in one meeting, I think everyone can agree that he has the competency and the skills needed to lead this committee.
Okay. Representative Kidd, you have 3 minutes speaking nomination.
I appreciate the nomination, and I would just like to introduce myself a little bit, give you guys a little bit of background. I haven't met with each of you separately yet, and I apologize for that. This first year schedule in the econ program is rather demanding and doesn't allow me for a lot of free time. However, the second year is a lot easier, at least that's what the second years tell me. So I look forward to being that heavy presence here at ASM. As Chair McNally said, I do come from Notre Dame. That's where I got my undergraduate degree in economics and mathematics. I'm originally from Ohio. However, I've slowly been moving my way northwest, and so I now make Madison my home. So I believe there's 3 criteria that really define this position. One is perseverance, the next is objectivity, and the other is organizational skills. I embody all 3 of those, I believe, and I'd like to speak to all 3. First is perseverance. I'm a cross-country runner by nature, so I know how to persevere through tough situations. and also just through hard times in school. I mean, I've gone through an undergraduate degree at this point. I've gone through my first year of PhD school at this point, so I know what it means to persevere through the hard times and to really push through the tough things that need to get taken care of. Second, objectivity. There's a clear-cut criteria to how you evaluate all of these grant proposals and everything, and I believe I can just follow those to a T. There's no bending the line or anything like that, it's just following the rules there. And third, organizational skills. In my internship I had one time in DC, I had to actually read through 150 different academic papers on economics and how that relates to the family, and then organize all the results into a well-defined document to then be published for a small think tank. And I was able to do that in the summer. Just think what I can do in a year. Now there are issues of availability and knowledge of the committee, and I would like to address those as well. For availability, like I said, the first year is the toughest year for the econ program, and I will be done with that in a little over seven weeks. So now comes the second year. The second year is just getting down to research, and I can definitely allot my time very easily between doing research and doing my work as chair of the finance committee. The second is knowledge of the committee. As of 2 months ago, I did not know the committee's existence. However, reading up on it and how its procedures are run, I believe that I can be very confident at the position of being chair. Also, I am a researcher by nature, and I have this summer to learn it all. So there should be no fear in me being able to run the meetings in an orderly manner. Thank you. I am done.
Thank you. Representative Nyberg, you'll want me to speak to why you nominated Ziki Dow.
The reason I nominated Ziki Dow is because Ziki was on ASM Student Council AC session. He came in kind of halfway through, and he just had kind of this drive to learn everything about the ASM processes, our different committees, and also he also learned a lot about even SSC and student judiciaries, having to sit into like many of those meetings that happen at the end of the session. I think his knowledge of many of the financial policies of the university involving articles, as well as his knowledge of some of the specific policies that arose at the end of the discussion of last session will make him valuable on finance committee. And I'm really looking forward to hear what he has to say about his nomination for finance committee chair.
Great. Ziki, you have 3 minutes as soon as you begin.
Thank you. Okay, so first I would really appreciate Sarah for my nomination. Sorry, I should say Charlie. So just talk a little bit about myself. So I am a 5th-year graduate student as well, and I've been sitting on the ASM Finance Committee since last semester. It's from November last year, so a little bit more than 1 semester. So we have been I've been experienced dealing with all the events grants, travel grants, and at the very last stage, the operation grants. And also, besides that, I've got involved in the university level committees. So I've been sitting on the Administrative Excellence Committee. So we are trying to save student money for, essentially that directly it is saving the university money on scientific supplies. But in turn, I would consider that as a saving of student tuition as well. So I think I've been having good experience sitting on committees, and I've demonstrated that I can, I have enough time commitment I can spend on the committee itself. I'm currently a designator, so I only need to take 3 credits next semester or next year. Then that would allocate me a lot of time to spend together with the committee members and other RSOs. And I've had experience and knowledge about the viewpoint neutrality and their applications, so I think I am a perfect candidate. Besides that, several things I want to address. So number one is I really want to get a chance to reach out to RSOs, make sure they know the policies and they know what's going on in the ASM and in the finance community. So I want to step one step further to let people know what's going on and why they should get money and why something will come out just fine. Also, the next thing is if I'm getting elected into the chair, I would enforce the rules we have been discussing since the last committee, which is we will begin to check out people asking money from ASM if they actually follow the policies, if they actually are using the money as they claim. So that is additional accountability we have never done for the recent several years. And we will implement that to make sure people, students' money get spent responsibly. And that's it. Thank you all for your attention.
Thank you. Floor is open for questions for the candidates. Any questions? Representative Nagayama?
Oh, yeah. I didn't have to raise my placard. How committed or I guess how capable do you feel of, first gaining the knowledge that's needed to be the chair of this position, but then also to be able to train your committee members on that knowledge that you've gained?
Cool. Cool. We'll start the same order that was nominated, so Representative Katie.
Okay. Like I said, I will take this summer to thoroughly learn all the necessary information I need to run the committee successfully. And in terms of teaching, I'm a TA this semester and have teaching abilities in my back pocket now, so I'll be able to relay that information as best I can.
Okay. And Ziki?
Okay, thanks. Thank you for asking the question. So, several things. Number one, I have today sitting on the committee, so I think I have possess certain knowledges I have. And also, I have talked to the last chair, Chair Kurt Coates, before, and I learned a lot of things, the differences between roles of committee members and committee chairs. So I would like to also work with the staff members to learn more about how to be a responsible chair on that. And also, besides, I have 3 semesters of teaching experience as a TAs, and I think I have a pretty good knowledge of training people as well.
Do you follow?
I do not.
Representative Buick?
You mentioned investigating to make sure that organizations are using the money the way that they say that they will and holding them accountable. If you were to determine that someone was funded to put on a certain event and they did not follow through with what they had proposed in the way that they spent the money, what would you do?
Okay, so that has been actually written in the bylaw changes. So we would ask them the money back, basically.
Okay. Do you follow?
Nope.
Representative Brack?
So this is particularly for UCP, but if either one wants to answer, you mentioned that you want to reach out to RSOs more to increase awareness of these grants. How do you intend to do so?
That's a very good question. So my first strategy, maybe I think slightly different from others, but my first strategy is I would like to compile an email list containing all the financial contact of all the RSOs. So the first thing I would do is let them know, here are things going on, and here I am. If you need to contact me, you can contact me. Then, if I have free time, as we mentioned before, we will check out the events. We'll check out the student organizations to make sure they know what we're doing and we know what they are doing and what they need. So that's my plan for now. If I'm elected the chair, I think I'll consult with other members of the group of the committee and also staff members, and we'll develop more detailed plans.
Representative?
Yes, I would have done that to a T actually. So no, I would have at least gotten in touch with each individual RSO, which I know is very difficult, but yeah, some sort of compiled email list to all of them. I would also like to hold separate workshops to allow different RSOs to, or at least the financial liaisons for those, to come in and actually learn how to fill out a proper application, what's necessary, what criteria they need to meet, just so everything's clearly explained. Kind of like the way that H&R Block does their, taxing, tax assistance type thing. So.
One second. ASCP?
Yeah, okay. We actually have a workshop now. Sorry.
Okay.
So yeah, definitely, I think that's something very important.
All right, thank you. Do you have a follow-up, Representative Brack?
No, thanks.
Chairman Yana.
Please call the question.
Motion to call the question. Is there a second? On point.
Can we call the question right after the question and answer, or
I assume you meant just motion to close Q&A. So is that what you meant?
Yeah.
Okay. So there's a motion to close Q&A. Is there a second? Okay. All in favor of closing question and answer, moving to debate, please raise your placard. All opposed? Okay, we are in debate now. Are there any points of debate? Points of debate? Yes, Representative Wickman.
I just want to talk about the importance, I guess, that I'm placing on outreach to student organizations. I personally walked around and talked to some of the GSSF groups because we have this, we have what's going on with the, with what SSFC has on here, on our agenda, and with policy violations. And there's just been a really large general disconnect between ASM and GSSF groups and all of the people that I have talked to personally. And I can't say that this is what everyone believes, right? But from all of the people that I've talked to, they see ASM as an entity completely separate from themselves, which I understand, but it's also like we're here giving them money or not giving them money, and we're an organization that directly impacts them. So I just want to stress the importance of definitely getting, reaching out and becoming like a liaison with student organizations so that they can be connected in these processes. And they're completely aware of policy changes that are taking place, because when I talked to Sex Out Loud, they said that they didn't even know about what SSFC had changed.
Can you please keep it to debate on the candidates? And I understand the outreach part, I allow that to be germane because it definitely relates highly to the Finance Committee. However, please stay away from the SFC bylaw changes that are on the agenda.
No, for sure. I'm just talking about like policy changes in general. Like I think that RSOs should be made aware of the fact that like we're making policy changes. Like I'm not attacking or talking about like things intentionally at all. Like I'm just talking in general. Like I think that we should be talking to RSOs about policy changes and things that are affecting them, because they're not aware of the fact that they're happening, and they're finding out like via the Badger Herald and Daily Cardinal. So I just wanted to stress the importance of that to both of the candidates and how that's something I'm taking into account in my voting.
Other points of debate? Representative Wheeler?
I would like to speak on behalf of Representative Kidd to support his nomination. I know Representative Kidd, and I know that that sounds like, oh, vote for my friend. But Representative Kidd is an incredibly intelligent person, and also is commonly described as pleasant. And by that I mean he's good at talking to anybody. He can talk to anybody, and that communication skill that he constantly demonstrates in our interactions, and as we have met all of you new friends here in this body, I know that Representative Kidd will be extremely effective in this position of leadership, especially in his communication with his other committee members and through communicating to the registered student organizations. Representative Kidd is also a by the rules, by the numbers kind of guy, and so you know that you're going to get a fair shake and a straight shot with Representative Kidd. So I would like to strongly support his nomination and encourage you to vote for him in this election.
I would just like to echo Representative Wheeler's endorsement of Andrew Kidd. Again, not just vote for my friend. I've only known Andrew Kidd for a month, but he is by far one of the best developers of interpersonal relationships within the first couple of meetings of anyone I ever met. And I say that as someone who works with an organization that meets with people one-on-one and does a lot of interpersonal building in a quick time period. And just also to echo that he is a very professional and by-the-book person, and I support him and his nominee.
Further points of debate? Representative Magnion?
Yeah, I would like to nominate Zishi Dai due to his experience on the committee. While I do give respect to Representative Kidd's ability to soak up knowledge during the summer period, and I think that's important, and I think that would work out well. I believe that Zichi has a head start and is going to be in a position where he can not only much quickly build the competency in himself, but also in his committee members as well, and be a better trainer about the policies and also the perspective, given his experience this past experience here in the 18th session. So,
further points of debate? Chairman Young?
I move to close the debate.
We're going to close the debate and call a question. In a second. Okay, all in favor of calling a question, please raise your placard. All opposed? Question being called. So I would encourage someone to motion for secret ballot.
Secret ballot.
In a second. All in favor of secret ballot, please say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Okay, staying tight. Barely. No one else is
Yeah, stay in his room.
Before we do the barely.
Yeah, so that'll be hard. So.
Congratulations, Representative Kidd, and the Finance Chair. Representative, I apologize, Chair Crandall. The motion for 10-minute recess, is there a second?
Second.
All in favor of 10-minute recess? Please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? And we will reconvene at 5:33.
How was it? It looked good. Yeah, what?
Yeah. So what's your game plan?
Just learn how to there's one time so I haven't definitely so I just know, I'm done
Right. So yeah. So the second year you actually start focusing on the it's all be focusing on and then from there we'll be going on to like at the end of the second year you're writing your field paper, just another kind of thing that you need to pass on. And then you have actually it's kind of great way to work it. But then usually jump off of that, springboard off of that into usually about 5 years. So actually most of the but we're talking about the job market. So that's the game plan. See what life takes us. Yeah. It's one of the more. Very fun. It's fun. You're efficient when you get that. It's good. Our questions been really well. So hopefully by the time that I tell them, I like to direct. I like to go. I like to do. Go to like a research. So where are you from originally? Right, okay. So is this coming to place with your first time? Oh, my gosh. Very cool. So, it sounds like it's a place you and you came straight from underneath? I'm only 23. The first year didn't get some guys.
And I'm really glad to see another brother.
Yeah.
So I think the year before, my year before, we had 5
Wow.
So it's sort of really exciting.
So when So what kind of like, I mean, I just no problem.
It's more about something like financial business. If you want to go a little bit higher, how do you think you should do it?
You want to start your own like serving the students. No, I shouldn't. So you're fifth year. It's usually about 7 years.
Yeah, what I'm doing here is first time I was here
It's like you kind of reevaluate yourself after every year saying, all right, one more year.
So, yeah.
That's true. Yeah, more or less. I mean, there's still more work to find to that this year. And you actually but I hope to get a lot of the day business find more people. Working with It's very nice meeting you.
Finance committee staff will be that board. That's why we're on the street. Be outside. That's what they were doing here.
Rod, I really liked your
Yeah, it's all done.
You move it up a little.
Don't leave. Awesome, we're getting started. You're back again. Everybody take a seat. Okay, we're on to new business 2, appointment of a student activities center governing board chair. Floor is open for nominations. Vice Chair Giannopoulos.
I nominate Tony Falk.
The nomination for Tony Falk in a second. Can you accept?
Yes.
Okay. Floor is open on nominations. Representative Gardner.
I nominate Katie Carey.
Is there a second? Gardner. Okay. Katie, do you accept?
Yeah.
Okay, fantastic. Floor is open for further nominations. Floor is open for further nominations. Floor is closed for nominations. Okay. On point.
Where are we in the agenda?
I apologize. We are, a little bit ago, we moved 10, 1 and 2 to be taken up right at that point. So we are on 10-2. And then as soon as we're done with this, we will move on to 8-1 to then final exchange.
Thank you.
Yep, no problem. So, I apologize. Who nominated? Vice Chair Giannopoulos, you're welcome to speak to the nomination for Tony Falk.
Sure. So the reason I nominate Tony Falk is because I've worked with him, not in official capacity over this entire year, but just being in the office, working on ASM things or working on homework. And he always talks about SAT-GB, and at that point, when he first introduced it to me, I didn't know what it was. So he had to explain a lot about what they did and how their processes worked. And from being on the board for a little over a year and a half now, I think Tony knows all the processes and intricacies of what go on SAT-GB. I also think for any board that we may have, that it is important that, especially one that allocates things, that the chair would be somebody that has been on the board before. I also think that Tony works very hard, and he's a great candidate for this position.
Great. Tony, you have 3 minutes to speak to yourself. Ready to begin?
Thank you for the nomination. I first wanted to talk about, well, as Maria always said, I always talk about SAT-GB, like it's my life. It's the happy place, I say at ASM. It's where stuff gets done. There's not really these like crazy politics or anything, and it's been really, really rewarding this year. And so I first want to talk about like the qualifications that I have for it, and then some goals that I have for the upcoming years. So first, as I said, I was on the board for over a year and a half. I was vice chair this year. And then I really worked with Brianna closely to like restructure the allocations process and the entire board.
on like the intricacies of like each part of it. And I think for like running the board, I think this is like a strong thing you need to have is understanding how to run this allocations process and to teach it to the new members that are coming onto this board. So I think that's like a strong qualification that I possess. And then also another thing that I'm working on next year for one of my goals is working on building like community in SAC. And one of those would be, I ran 2 SAC mixers the past 2 semesters where I had different organizations come within the SAC and just talk about what their grievances were, like what they want us to be doing. And so like that's one thing I want to keep broadening for our space here. And so for our goals, David currently is working on with the union right now to make sure that the space is that they told us that we would have for student space would be given to us. And I think this is one of our main goals that we need to keep watching through the next few years because it takes a long time to do this. And make sure that the space that they give us is to what the student orgs really want to have in the space. Like one-on-one space is definitely a big thing. Having a meeting room that anyone can use just like on the spot, and then like little offices for like storage and different things like that. So we're going to really be kind of working with that and figuring out how to best use the space that will be given. And then also, now that the allocations process is doing really well, we did a great job this year, and it really doesn't have any flaws that need to really be fixed. I think we need to broaden our scope to more of all of campus and focus on how to get more student space for organizations on campus, because I know as running a few orgs, being here and being involved, that it's hard to get student space, and it's really necessary to have a central location and really just to be out there just so you can speak to other students. And then 2 other things that I'd have is I really want everyone on the board to have a project if they really do want one, because I think everyone needs to feel like they're necessary to be part of the board. Have like a small little project that they can work on or large, it's really up to them. And then also, as I talked earlier, I really want to build community and every aspect like that, and I'm ready for the challenge, and I think we can do this by creating a better, even better SAC and really broadening our scope to more, be more advocates for student space on campus.
Thank you. Representative Gardner is wanting to speak to right now, maybe Katie.
Yeah, so I've worked very closely with SAC-GB for the last part of this last semester with Chair Barth, and I do know that Chair Barth has worked very closely with Katie, and Katie came to a few of our meetings towards the end kind of to get more of a feel for things. But I can definitely attest that Katie very much cares about this student space and that it's allocated properly and has been educated on procedures that SAC-GB took up this last year. And I really do trust that Chair Barth has come forward and endorsed Katie. I absolutely trust Chair Barth's opinion of who can effectively lead this after her leadership style.
Katie, you'll have 3 minutes to speak for yourself as soon as you get started.
Hi, so my name is Katie Carey, and I just first want to thank Chair Barth for her endorsement and her kind words during open forum, and also Representative Gardner for his nomination. So just a little background on me. I'm a junior studying political science and economics, and next year I'll actually be starting a master's program in international public affairs with the Follett. And I also have worked now for 2 years at the Student Activity Center desk. And working at the desk, I've really gotten to know the specific needs of this building and all of the tenants and all of the people who use this building. And I've come to appreciate this building quite a bit. So it's enough on my background. What I want to talk to you briefly now is what 19th session SAC-GB can be. What 18th session did really well was they nailed down all these policies on the fundamental duties of SAC-GB, such as the allocation policy. And what that means is that we don't have to start from scratch this session. And we can expand our mission to be advocates for student space all over campus. And that's something I really want to focus on. So some of the policies that will be integral to that is that I want to start a retreat and training process for SAC-GB members. This is important because we can establish this shared mission, and we can get staff input on that shared mission. And also, we can identify shared values, which later on, when we inevitably disagree with each other about something, we can fall back on the shared mission and shared values. And then I also want to use this training process to create roles for SACGB members, give them defined duties, have them take on defined projects, and have them be the director of that project. This is really important because it also will give them leadership development, it will help us run more effectively, and it will give them some invested interest in SACGB and in this building running more effectively. And then finally, the thing that I think is really important is that we create a council that includes all the management for all these different buildings that have student space on campus, so that we can share our knowledge about student space, be a resource for when new space is allocated to us on campus or when they're renovating new space, and really just have another group that advocates for student space on campus. And again, these are all very brief descriptions, so I would love to hear your questions during question and answer. And I'm just really passionate about this and very excited for 19th session SACGB. Thank you.
Thank you. We'll now do question and answer for the candidates. Any questions for either of the candidates? Representative Wheeler?
Can you tell us more about this potential council of stakeholders from different buildings where we have student space? Like, who do you envision being on the committee and like the major purposes of that kind of body and council?
Yeah, so I talked a lot about this with Chair Barth. I've been thinking about these policies for the past 3 months now. And so this kind of policy is something that Chair Barth and I have kind of refined together. And the people would be sitting on it would be management at all the different buildings across campus that have student space. So the SACGB, so like the chair of SACGB, and possibly the floor manager of the Student Activity Center as well. The unions, engineering has student space, any of the places on campus that have student space. And the purpose of this is that we want to create more coordination between all these groups that have student space, so that we can really talk about how do we use this space effectively. What are the needs of student space? Where do we need to expand our student space, and what types of student space is in the highest demand? And so then when new spaces become available, or when, for example, when they renovated Gordon Commons, and there were groups that said we really need a place that doesn't have carpeting so that we can have dance and performances there. And all they needed was it just be any material but carpeting. And they didn't do that. And if we have a committee like this in place, they could be advocates for those students, so they don't feel like they have to take on the rest of the university by themselves. So I think it's really important to get that coordination, and it goes with this whole thing that we've been talking about this year with educational innovation and getting rid of inefficiencies on this campus.
Do you have a follow-up?
Yes. For both of the nominees, can you tell me what you think your biggest accomplishment has been in the past so far being a member of the SACGB?
Tony Paul?
I definitely have to say, as like a collaboration between all the members from the past session was definitely the allocations process. We've had such problems in the past. The past session, we had to throw out our allocations process and just move upon what we actually already had in place and just leave them in their student space that they already had. So I would say that was our biggest accomplishment as a board. And then me personally, I really feel like working on the mixers was really rewarding to meet with more orgs and talk with them and feel how what they wanted to see the SAC governing board doing. And then also I would say the art gallery was just a really big accomplishment for our board as well to finally get that in place. It took about 2 years to kind of put in place.
Katie?
Okay, so I'm not, just as a clarification, I'm not a member of SACGB right now. Okay. But I've worked with SACGB, and what I worked on, I co-wrote with Representative Elder the SAC accountability policy, which is going to be pretty crucial to next year in working with the allocations process. So what that is a piece of legislation. So now that we have that allocations process in place, we're going to go around and check how much people are using their space. To make sure, because in the past there's been issues with people potentially not telling the truth about how many hours they use their space. So this just ensures that we're really allocating the space most efficiently, and make sure that people really are honest with what they're telling us, how they're using their space. And I think it's really important that we allocate space most efficiently as possible.
Do you have a question? Representative Gardner.
Yes. So my first question is in regards, and this is for both of you. to the changing demands of the student org space. So that's something that when I sat on the SSC governing board, was really important to me is the ability to convey, obviously student orgs now have different needs than they might have in the past, different types of space that they can use that they can really benefit from. And that's really to make sure that they're using that space most efficiently. So my question is, what experiences do you feel qualify you to make decisions about changing student org needs?
Well, first of all, like I stated, I've worked here for 2 years, so I've really gotten to know all the different organizations and what their needs are. Sitting at the desk, you interact with every single person who comes into this building, and you get an understanding of, I know something about most of you here just from working here, and I know that sounds a little creepy. But you get an understanding of each of these groups and what their needs are. I'm a person that is very good at rolling with whatever is given to me. I worked as the general outreach director at the Bad and Protest Political Action Committee, which is a political action committee that was started here on campus last year. And my duties change day to day on that. And I'm very amenable to working with that. I also have an intense ability to work with public policy. I mean, it's what I want to do with my life. I want to go into public policy. I'm starting a master's program in public affairs. So I am confident in my ability to take on any of these issues.
Joey?
I would say through the interviews that we had for the allocation process, I was really able to see who wanted what type of space. I mean, one of the biggest things we heard was they wanted the extra internal conference room for meeting space. It was really hard for people to get space on campus that they could just drop in quick and grab a quick meeting room. And then I also was able to see that one-on-one space for counseling was a huge thing for student groups. And I think through the interview process, I was able to see, especially people in the SAC and their organizations, what they want to see out of student org space on campus. And then also being involved in many other organizations on campus, I'm able to personally want other types of space that would be beneficial to each of our groups to make sure that we do the best of our ability for that organization.
Do you have a follow-up?
Yes, and this one's also for both of you. So the other thing that I really value about the SAC Governing Board and also about the other subcommittees in ASM is how oftentimes there's such a lack of political investment in decisions. Things aren't really about partisanship, but rather producing the best result for students, in particular student space in this instance. So how would you deal with a situation in which there was a conflict of political opposition or political partisanship on the SAC Governing Board?
Joey?
I mean, through when I've been on the board, there really hasn't been. So if there was, that did come about, I would definitely make sure to see it through that after we meet on the situation that we do both speak individually about it, and then I would do a meeting together to really talk it out and not have it as being a political thing, but really why someone really truly wants this to go through and spend this reason for having it go through. So I really think it really doesn't really happen, but if it did, I'd be able to handle whatever came forward.
Katie?
I think as the chair of a committee, you're committing to not being political in any way. You're committing to looking at every issue analytically, which is something that I do every day and in my econ major. And if I had to describe myself in one word, it would be analytical. I was talking to Brianna about this earlier. And I also now intern at the Wisconsin Alumni Association, which is a nonpartisan group, and I work with the advocacy department, and I interact with alumni from both sides of the political spectrum, and I have to be politically neutral in that case. So I'm very, very good at distancing myself from the situation and looking at it from an analytical framework.
Do you have a final question? Representative Gardner, do you have a final question?
Oh, sorry. There's a football flying.
So, Chairman Nally.
So thank you for both applying for the position. I had a unique perspective and privilege of reading both of your resumes, and one of the big questions that stuck out to me was, do you both have time for this position? I know my concern, you're going into grad school and Tony, I know you're very busy as well. Do you feel you can really dedicate and allocate the time to accomplish the ambitious goals that you both set for yourselves?
Katie?
Yes, in one word. Right now I work at the desk and I also intern. I will be dropping my internship should I get the chair, and I will be significantly reducing my hours at the desk, basically to one shift a week. I also, during my sophomore year, when I mentioned that I was the General Outreach Director of the Political Action Committee, spent about 30 to 35 hours a week on that. So I am very good at managing my time, and I know how much I can take on. I spent about 2 weeks analyzing how much time this would be for me. I talked with the chair, the current chair, other past chairs and other members of the board, as well as someone who is in the same master's program that I am, to make sure that I can fully commit myself to this. I am not someone who takes on duties lightly. When I commit to something, I commit 100%. So I fully analyze the situation, and I'm confident in my ability to put all the effort into it.
Tony?
I kind of have like the same story. I lead 2 organizations on campus right now currently, and I did take a good month to really decide if this was what I know I love StatGB, and do I really want to take on this position. And I really decided, like, I want to go for it. I'm going to drop the other 2 organizations, pass them along to other people that I know that can do a good job with it, and really just see StatGB prosper even more than it already has this year. So, and I'm really, really busy on campus now, and I've always been able to have great time management, so I really see my ability to run the board. It'll work out very well.
Your follow-up?
No, thank you.
Representative Magañón?
Yeah, for both of you all. How do you view the relationship between the Student Activity Governing Board and, say, UW administration, the Dean of Students Office, but also, say, UHS as well? How do you kind of view the SAC-GB's relationship with other large institutions on campus?
So are you trying to see, like, I guess I have a question for you, like, how, like, UHS that's in that, like, in this building, like, how we're working with them personally, or, like, any big thing on campus that we should be working with?
Yeah, no, I guess, UHS comes to mind in this building, but also even outside of this building as well. What is the Student Activity Governing Board's relationship with UW administrators or with, the Dean of Students like Lori Burkhardt? If there is that relationship, or how would you kind of envision that relationship as well?
Okay. I know Brianna had a lot of relationships with many officials on campus and many administrative people, so I see taking over that place as being the chair of the board, and then building those connections and going out there and reaching out to other administrators on campus. I really do see, if I'm really advocating for more student space on campus, I need to be meeting these other administrative people and making sure our voices are heard. And so I really think the more people you know, obviously, the better it's going to work out. So I think the goal of the SAC-GB is really to make those connections on campus and make the connection with the officials.
Kate?
So I think first and foremost, SAC-GB's duties are to the students and to the student organizations. And it's so far that those student organizations need the support of administration. That's where the chair comes in. However, I don't think that the chair is beholden to any of those administrators, or that they should feel the need to, take any of those administrators' decisions or opinions into account. I think they need to take into account the opinions of the students and student organizations.
Do you have a follow-up?
Yeah, I guess kind of a question about training. What do you think are kind of the most important pieces of information to learn as a Student Activity Governing Board member, and how do you plan on kind of educating on those topics?
Katie?
I am a little obsessive. I actually have a sample training retreat scheduled with times and everything, which I worked on yesterday. So one of the things that I think is really important to know, I want to increase SAC-GB's familiarity with the SAC. Working on the desk, I've seen SAC-GB members, or like SAC-GB under 2 different boards. And frankly, most of the people at the desk don't know who the members in SACGB are, and I think that that's a shame. I think that everyone in this building should know who SACGB members are and be familiar with them. So I want to increase the familiarity with the SAC, because I think if you're governing a building, you should know about it. I also think that as far as training goes, it's really important to develop a collaborative vision and use training to say, what do we want to do this year? And how are we going to do those things? How are we going to take those on? So I think that's more for training what's important. As Brianna stated in open forum, we're a special committee. We don't have to operate under Robert's rules. So I think it's a brief introduction to Robert's rules is helpful, but it's not necessarily of highest importance. I think it's more important to know about the Student Activity Center. And of course about the accountability policy and the allocations process that we'll be working on.
Tony?
I totally agree with everything that you were saying. I don't want to repeat what you said, but definitely the biggest thing I saw was with like 18 session, not a 17 session, not being able to be like viewpoint neutral, I guess, in the allocations process. So we had a VPN training this past session that really, I think, helped a ton of people on the board, and then especially having an SSC member present, it really made sure that groups were, the members were being viewpoint neutral. So I think that would be a big training that we need to keep broadening. And then I also agree that we should really have a retreat where each board member really gets to know each other and is able to like bounce off ideas and come up with ways that to better the SAC and the other options that we're going to pursue on campus. And then I also see the front desk staff. That's like a great point that we need to be more with the integrated with the different officials and employees that are in the SAC, not just only the organizations.
Do you have final questions?
I do not.
Representative Member? There's a motion and a second to close the Q&A. All in favor of closing question and answer, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, we're going to debate these two candidates. Chair now.
Move to call the question.
Second.
The motion to call the question and the second. All in favor of calling the question, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay. Once again, staff will, I'm sure, pass around some more. Ask for
Motion to proceed.
motion. All in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Thank you.
Can we mention names on the board?
Oh, yes.
Yes, we will be back on track. We'll be starting up with introduction to legislation number 1. Then ballot change. And we'll have 2 and 3, and then we'll go to old business, and then final review business number 3, and we'll finish it up. So yes, we're done. tie, so we're gonna vote again. So I don't know if anything's going to change.
What information?
Non-points?
What happens to Chair Nybark's vote since she's no longer here?
It will change the outcome. So this Just kidding, she's here. So I don't know if anything's going to change. If you want to change your vote, I'm not too keen. See what happens.
Information, what is the policy of co-chairs?
My co-chairs, they need to be declared, yeah, I can look it up, they need to be declared together, I believe. For nomination, I mean, obviously, you can make it set.
What information?
Compliance, did the chair vote? Yes, the chair did vote. What?
Do we go until we move the time?
Yes. Yes, unless there's, yes. Go on. I think what happens in the vote. It wasn't tie once again. We're going to do one more vote. The people in the room has changed slightly, so we'll see how it goes. And I'm also not going to vote in this one.
Point of information.
Point?
Is this like the regular procedure?
It is, yes.
To just, Point of information.
Point?
Doesn't the chair break the tie?
The chair of ASM can vote at any time, and I voted with them, I voted with all the representatives and other chairs the first 2 times, but I'm not going to vote this time unless there's a tie again, in which case I would break it at that point.
Okay.
So we'll temporarily abstain, if you will.
They were both just printed out.
Congratulations to Katie Carey. Okay, moving on. We are back under introduction to legislation, event bylaw change. So, S6 Representative Ellie Butcher, I imagine you want to speak this where we should. Okay, that works. You certainly may.
So, essentially what you guys have got, and I know David already told me I sent a really long email, so I'm probably just going to repeat myself. But essentially the changes are to make SMC more consistent and efficient in our policy violations bylaws and also with our eligibility criteria. So a big complaint that we got was that our current definition of events inhibits group's ability to hold series of events, office hours, things like that that could be considered direct services except for that they plan the date and time. By changing the definition of event to allow for a series of events to be counted as direct services, it makes it much easier for groups, much easier for SSC. Our interpretation of event will be a lot more consistent. As far as the policy violation changes, what we have right now in the bylaws is rather draconian. We've voted down those consequences almost every time in the past session of SSC because they just really weren't appropriate for the kinds of violations that were happening. We also differentiated between general wage and advertising violations. If you are forgetting a ASM logo on your water bottles that you're handing out, that shouldn't hold the same consequences as if you are clocking more than 20 hours per week when you know you're not supposed to. So the last thing that was done in there then was to differentiate between individual and group intentional policy violations. We really don't want to hold the entire group accountable if one member of that group did something intentionally against our policies for just subgroups. So really I think both of the bylaw changes benefit groups, and I can't see any reason not to approve them. They make SOC more consistent, more efficient, and they are beneficial to the staff.
Would you give yourself a question?
Yes.
Okay. Representative Rowan.
How will, what I'm worried about with this new piece of legislation is that a group could always blame What?
Which one?
I'm sorry, the policy violation.
Sure.
Is that,
Are we discussing these two pieces of legislation individually?
No, I apologize, yes, we are.
Oh, I'm so sorry. I should have waited on the second one. That's my fault.
wait, which one are we on?
We are on the events bylaw change, she was,
I'm really sorry. My bad.
Okay, one second.
this make sure the question as well. Was there a question from me?
Oh, no, I have a question.
Okay, I'll clear it once.
Because we're on policy violation.
No.
Okay, so we're on event bylaw. Okay. Okay, now I have some questions. That I got everything, okay. Okay, so, I'm sorry, I didn't read the past, how it was past stated, because I didn't have much time this week. What did you change in this? What did you edit to make it less clear?
Oh, essentially what was done was that series of events can be counted as direct services. So as long as they're still tailorable and educational, those can be counted as direct services, whereas previously it said that events could not be counted towards direct services, and the definition of event included a series of events. So what this is allowing things like office hours, or if you're holding something every week, as long as it still fits the rest of the direct service criteria, but it's a set date and time.
Do you follow?
Yeah, so potentially, it could be, direct service hours could be considered direct service hours even if no one was in direct service at that time, like office hours, for instance, if no one came to their office hours.
I guess, but the thought is that it's more for things where they're holding workshops. I guess office hours probably isn't the best example, but if they're holding like a weekly workshop that people can show up to, yeah, you're correct that if no one shows up, that would be still counted in their hours. But they're planning a year ahead of time for this always, so they're counting how much they think they're going to have direct services. They're projecting based off the past year. So, I mean, I don't think that that's
Do you have a question?
Yeah, so what would happen if a group decides that a series of events are more for, one second, let me think of the way how to phrase it. So the groups can have series of events, and what if those series of events, never mind, I can't phrase it well.
Check it.
Yes, so how is a series of events then, how can groups get funding for these series of events if it's not a direct service or anything?
Oh, they're going to get funding for that. The way the GSSF works is they don't only get funded for their direct services. Our eligibility criteria require that in order to get any funding at all, 50% plus one of their time needs to be spent on direct services. Direct services has a different set of criteria that they have to meet to be counted towards that 50% plus one. What this allows is for more things to be counted as direct services. So more things can go toward that 50% plus one goal. But right now, if they meet that, if they have that amount of money, then, or if they have that amount of time spent on direct services, when they present a budget, they can also ask for money for events and supplies. They get a full itemized budget, so they still get funding for events. This is just to get them funding at all.
Okay.
Do you follow?
No, thank you.
Representative Whitgander?
So is an event a direct service now? I'm confused.
No, it is not.
Do
Okay.
you follow?
So not only is, so I'm so confused because if a program is requestable, terrible, and educational,
Yes.
it just can't be an event that is requestable, tailorable, or educational.
The idea is that events, as they are defined, happen on a specific date, which would make them not requestable. What this does is if it fulfills all the other requirements and it happens multiple times on a set date, then it doesn't need to fulfill that necessarily requestable portion, as long as it's still tailorable, educational, accessible to all students, regardless of membership in the group, and not for post-credit.
Do you have a follow-up question?
follow-up questions, we'll have to toss up when we get to that next.
I'm sorry, what was that?
I'll yield my time, thank
Okay,
you.
thank you. Representative Maggie.
Yeah, so a series of events with this legislation is direct service or not direct service?
Okay, so it's a little confusing, especially if you haven't, and I understand if you guys haven't been trained on the eligibility criteria, this is hard to explain. So if it's a series of events, by definition, has to still fit these specific direct service criteria besides the requestable one. So if it's a series of events that's not still tailorable, educational, etc., it's an event. If it is a workshop kind of series, something like that, that is still educational, tailorable, accessible, etc., then it is not counted as an event. So essentially this allows us to differentiate between different kinds of series of events. I know that makes it sound like it's more complicated than it is, but it actually clears things up a lot, because in the past, this second part of the definition was not there. It just said that it could not be an individual event, series of events, etc., which meant that you couldn't, even if you were looking at a series of events that was a workshop and that was tailorable, requestable, accessible, you could not count that toward the direct service requirement because it was listed as an event. This allows us to differentiate between different types of series of events or workshops.
Do you have a follow-up?
Why is a publication not a direct service?
Because a publication would not necessarily be tailorable. So if they're putting out a publication, that can't be tailored to the needs of the individual student reading it.
Do you have a question?
Yeah.
Okay, thank you. Representative Wheeler.
Was the definition of direct service here, did it change at all? No. Okay.
Do you have a follow-up?
Yes. So to get a yes or no answer, a series of events, it is not a direct service, and if the dates are scheduled, it is also not an event. Sorry, I'll make this half of that question. A series of events is not a direct service. That is true. Yes.
That's really, the thing is that
I really want a yes or no answer. So
it's not a yes or no answer anymore, is the thing. It's not definitively not a direct service. Currently, series of events are definitively not direct services. In this format, series of events can be direct services if they fulfill the rest of the direct service requirements.
Okay.
Do you have a follow-up question?
Yes. Do you believe that the way that this is worded now is going to be clearer for students coming from the student organization to understand which of their programming will be eligible for direct service, will be categorized as a direct service and therefore be eligible for funding?
They're going to be trained on it. I absolutely plan on making sure that all of them completely understand this.
I do not have a closing comment because it's not the correct.
Vice Chair Giannopoulos.
I move to suspend bylaw 3.044 to take this up right now.
Objection.
No, okay. She's saying just suspend as we vote on tonight. She's not saying she's not saying to vote on it now. She's saying we need to be able to vote on it after we deliberate.
Objection.
Oh, okay. I'll do that later. So is there a motion to suspend ballot 3.044? Is there a second? Second. Is there a second? Okay. All in favor of suspending ballot 3.044 to allow us to vote on this tonight after Q&A and debate, please say aye. Aye. Opposed?
Nay.
Okay, and then usually the chair, that carries. So we'll be able to vote on this the first time tonight. We are back in Q&A. Okay. So Chair McDonald.
So I guess coming from Major GSSF, my concern is I find it to be very simple to host a repeated event in your office space and not have anyone attend it and receive funds as direct service. I really do see Representative Rowland's comment as an actual issue.
I'm sorry, can you please not refer to other representatives and they'll try to get to the question.
What checks and balances would prevent me as a member of a GSSF from holding office hours that were not regularly attended in direct service? Is there a fail-safe in place?
Which really, what the accountability liaisons, I guess that's their purpose, is to make sure that your duty and performance is that
they say they're going to. The thing is, my personal belief on accountability liaisons is that they shouldn't be acting like a cop, we should be policing the DSS. I think that, really the only way to have an accountability measure like that is to have a secret shopper format where an accountability liaison would go without notifying the group to officers and making sure that that's happening. However, the problem with this is we can't, if you took that into consideration, I would consider that to be not you can, because you would be considering the popularity of the group. You can't guess how many students are going to show up to stand outside. As long as they're spending that time to make themselves available to provide that direct service, I feel like that's what we're supposed to take into consideration. If a group were to come before you and say, we want funding to do this direct service, and you said, I don't think enough students are going to show up to that because you're not that popular, you would have committed a BTN violation and you would get yourself kicked off as a student. So I don't think that that's something you can really take into consideration with this.
Do a follow-up? No, thank you. Representative Rowland.
Okay, so you think that even though no one attends a scheduled event, that should still be considered direct service, because or else we'd be violating BPI?
What I'm saying is that if they're making themselves available to provide a direct service at that time, then that time can be counted as direct service. Because you can't, maybe you can, but I can't see in the future, so I don't know if anyone's going to show up for that event. When you're giving GSSFs funding, you are giving them funding under the assumption that they are going to advertise these things enough to bring students out to their event. They have to have a student-served tracking form when they apply for eligibility. So if you look at that and say, no one went to this event, then yeah, in the past, if they've been holding off hours and they have on their student-served tracking form that 0 people showed up, then, you could choose not to count that, but you can't, if you don't have that number, if it doesn't say 0, you can't say, I assume that 0 people are going to show up.
Do a second project to follow?
Yes. So, what I'm worried about this is, how is this tailorable to all students? If, for instance, someone has class, let's say, on Wednesday at 1 o'clock to 2, and the event is at 1 to 2. How is that tailorable to all students?
That would be under the requestable section. Tailorable is...
I'm sorry.
That's the point. This suspends that requirement. If it's something that's held the same way and iterated multiple times in a year, but it still fulfills the rest of the requirements, it doesn't need to be requestable on that day. However, they still need to have other direct services that are requestable. They won't be able to meet that 50% plus 1 requirement by only doing a series of workshops. They still need to make those requestable to students. So if you have class, if they hold a regular weekly workshop on a Thursday and you have class at that time, you still have to be allowed to go to that group and say, hey, I can't go to your workshop on this day. Can you provide it for me and my student organization at this time on this day? And they have to say yes. And that's required now of all groups with their direct service. They have to be able to provide that at the request of students and student organizations.
Do you have a follow-up question?
So theoretically, someone could have a workshop at 12 o'clock every night and no one come. I'm just saying theoretically, and no one come, and that be considered direct service.
What you're misunderstanding is that we are deciding what things are direct services in relation to how they happen in the future. We're not looking at what they're currently doing. That's not the way it works, essentially. I can't really give you a better answer. That's not the way it works.
Chair Crandall?
So, is a program that fulfills the requested requirements of direct service?
Yes.
Good follow-up?
Yes. Is a program not limited to being an event or series of events or publication, etc.?
I'm sorry, what?
Is a definition of a program not limited to also including being an event, series of event, publication?
Oh, it's definitely not.
Your final question?
So would you say that this proposed legislation clarifies that a series of events under a program is a direct service?
Yes.
Representative Vander.
Yeah, I'm just going through all of the definitions of the
I'm just going through the criteria to get a hold on this, but I guess, can you clarify the different series of events? Because you said it creates categories or differentiated.
No, it doesn't create categories. What it does is it allows individual members of the SFC to differentiate between different kinds of series of events or workshops. So it allows an SFC member to say, this series of events is held on these specific dates throughout the year, it's held weekly, but it's still tailorable, educational, accessible, etc. So therefore, it fulfills the direct service requirements and can be counted toward the 50% plus 1. You could also look at that and say, this is held on these dates once a week, but it's not educational or it's not tailorable. So that is counted as an event and therefore not counted the 50% plus 1 requirement.
You have a follow-up?
Yeah, why wouldn't we just take out in the direct service criteria, why wouldn't we just take out the program is not an individual event, series of events or whatever? Because then it would still have to meet all of those criteria anyway, and then they'd be able to decide whether or not that event was a direct service or not.
Because inherently what it's saying is that events, if they're held on one date, that can't be a direct service. It's not. It is impossible for an event held at one time to be a direct service. Because therefore it wouldn't be requestable if it's only held once. But this allows for things that are happening multiple times that students can go to at any time to be counted as direct services.
Right.
Do you have a follow-up question?
Yeah. So I guess what I'm thinking is because the direct service criteria say that it has to be available, it has to be available upon request, requestable, it has to be tailorable, it has to be accessible. The program must be available to recipients continuously throughout the year. I just don't know why we wouldn't get rid of event completely, because in order for it to be a direct service, or I don't understand why we wouldn't completely get rid of the fact that an event doesn't count as a direct service across the board, because in order for it to be counted as a direct service anyway, it would have to meet all of those. And it seems like it's just like extra confusion for people who are going through this process or want to understand what's going on.
I mean, I see your concern, but I don't think it's really a problem. I don't think that that's something that's necessary, and I feel like no one on SFC has had much trouble discerning between events and direct services. What this is doing is it's allowing groups to count more things towards their direct service requirement. This is a really good thing for groups to be able to count more stuff as their direct service to students. So if you took out event entirely, I mean, under that line of thought, groups could have big dance parties that weren't educational at all 6 times a year and want to get funded for that, and they could get eligibility for that, and that's not providing a service that's requestable, tailorable, accessible, and educational to the student body. So I understand where you're coming from on that, but this is really, I understand it sounds complicated. I definitely do, and I've been doing this for a year, and that's why it doesn't sound complicated to me, but it's really just allowing groups some more leeway to count more things that they do for students as direct services. It's going to help groups not get caught with this 50% plus 1 number. It's going to help them not be below that number. So I don't know. I don't think that would work to take that out entirely, because I think that would actually be more confusing to take that out entirely. This just allows for some more leeway for groups and for SOC members with what they're counting.
Can I just clarify what I was talking about?
Sure.
Just because that was a really sufficient answer. I just wanted to note, I didn't necessarily meant event in this. I was just looking at the bylaws and I didn't make it clear that I was talking about the definition of direct service.
Okay, I'm sorry.
It's okay. I totally didn't say that at all.
Chairman Kelly?
Would you say that this change would be greatly beneficial to the majority of GSSS on campus?
Absolutely.
Would you
follow?
Yes, I do. Would you say this change would help GSSS better serve students on campus?
Absolutely.
Thank you for your time.
Do you have a question?
No.
Here. Representative Isada.
I guess my question is like how you were talking about training before, and I'm wondering how you're gonna provide that training on like this new bylaw to like the RSOs.
Yeah, absolutely. So, for full disclosure, several offices, I'm not sure if yell at me if I'm not supposed to say, but I'm running for chair of SOC. And I've met with, I've met with every, I've met with almost every DSSF group. I had some trouble getting a few to answer my emails, but I've met with almost every DSSF group to talk about training for next year. I plan on having a retreat between the SOC and the DSSF leaders to have them provide direct services for all the SOC members so we can see what they do, to go through SOC policies, to really, really, really go through the direct service criteria, because I understand that they are complicated. And I've already met with several incoming leaders of GSSFs to like hash through this with them and say, here's what all this means, here's how you write out your eligibility application. I think that a lot of members of FOC are really committed to getting rid of this idea that SOC is this evil committee that doesn't want anyone to get money. I think we're all really committed to making sure groups understand the process that they need to go through to get this funding. And I am above and beyond committed to giving groups as much help as they need to understand this. And like I said, I know it's complicated, and I needed a lot of help to understand it when I first joined SOC, so I understand that incoming leaders of GSSFs are going to have trouble with this. And I'm not going to stop training them on it until I am 110% positive that they understand it. So I will make myself available to train anyone who wants training on this at all times.
Do you have a follow-up?
No, thanks.
Representative Wheeler.
So, the question was asked, is it to you, is a series of events under a program a direct service? You said yes. That happened. That was the direct quote. So do you feel that the wording and how you have defined direct service here in this proposed legislation communicates your understanding of what a direct service is clearly?
Yes.
Do you have a follow-up?
Yes. If I were going to propose an amendment to further clarify what kind of series of events could be funded as a direct service, would you have a proposal for that?
I think it's in there because it says an event is not a program which is requestable, tailorable, and educational, but iterated several times on data set factors.
Would you not?
Go ahead. I think that that's clarified in there because in here it says the program is not an individual event, series of events, and then to define event, it says that it is not a program which is requestable, tailorable, and educational. So that defines, in the direct service criteria, it defines those words by saying that it is not to be construed as something that is a program which is requestable, tailorable, and educational, but iterated several times on a data set by the group. So you can make an amendment, but I feel like it would be repeating what's already written.
Do you have a question?
I guess I'm just not sure what amendment you could put in there that would clarify this more. Series of events, we've talked about taking series of events out entirely, but the thing is that there can be series of events that cannot be construed as direct services because they are not educational or tailorable. So the reason that was left in there and then clarified by the definition of event was because there are still some things that are series of events that would not be direct service.
Do you have a final question?
No.
Chair Kidd.
Yeah, I forget my question, so.
Chair Satter.
Well, first my question. So as far as the training goes, because I think that's extremely important that the changes are made, that especially it seems like the point of this change is to allow more organizations access to funding for their core services, which are direct services.
Yep.
If you are chair, but more so if you are not elected chair, how do you see, I guess let's say if you are not elected chair, then are you confident that the body would still commit to training these individuals or these groups onto the potential new legislation?
Absolutely, and if the rest of the committee isn't, I am. So I don't need to be chair to train groups on this.
Okay, and this body can have confidence in that?
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Do you have a follow-up?
I do not.
Chair Kidd.
I remember my question. Would this allow more groups to become GSSFs?
I think it potentially could if groups have
chosen not to apply for GSSF funding because they didn't think that they could meet the 50% plus one requirement because they had series of workshops that they didn't think could be counted, then if they would do their calculations with this, then and find that they would meet that benchmark, then maybe they would apply. I'm not 100% sure. I do plan on reaching out to RSOs that are not GSSFs to ask if anyone wants to be trained on this so they can find out if maybe they would be eligible for GSSF funding. I'm more than willing to meet with groups outside of the current GSSF to talk to them about this if they want to try and figure out if they would be eligible.
Do you have a follow-up? No, thank you. Vice Chair Giannopoulos? Is there a motion to close Q&A? Is there a second?
Second.
Okay, all in favor of closing question and answer, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, Q&A is closed. We'll move to debate. Representative Lupander?
So I'm down for this change because I think it opens the opportunity for things that are actually defined through direct service except for that one stipulation. I think what's frustrating to me is that in talking to administration and in talking to people who work with our body, the organization as a whole and the governance structure is talked about in a really negative manner because we have so many bylaws. Our guiding documents are so long, and I think what's frustrating to me is that instead of adding this, like all we had to do was erase a couple words in a sentence. And it's frustrating to me that that didn't happen, but what we're doing is like putting more words in. And I just don't understand, like I get the educational part, and I feel like we could have figured something out there, but I will be voting for this because I like what it does. I would prefer to see our bylaws being shortened and not lengthened. With that, I yield.
Yeah, I'm really in favor of this. Coming from a major GSSF Badger Cali, this is going to revolutionize the way we do our service and the way our service team operates. It's going to allow for funding for service events that do meet this criteria. I think that one of the biggest critiques of this body is that, as Representative Wickbander did state, we are kind of stingy and it's very difficult to become a direct service. I think this opens this up to groups and GSSFs to fund services that are privately funding or that are not being funded and allow them to get funding to expand those services to greater service students. And for me, it's kind of a no-brainer. If this is what we're elected to do, is to help better serve students. I think this is what this piece of legislation does.
Great. Chair Crandall.
So, I sort of hear this sort of political parse and stuff going on here, and I think that we should recognize that this is a clarification of bylaws. This is going to help procedure, and it's going to help procedure in SFC. This is not a debate over whether more or less groups are going to get funded. This is a debate over making sure that our criteria are very clear to groups that while a series of events is not a direct service, a series of events that do fulfill requestable, tailorable, and educational as required by direct services is a direct service, which allows our groups to perform more direct services. That's the whole point. So I think that we should look at that and we were trying to argue over this and not whether, this will have more groups get eligibility. That's not what this debate should be about.
Point of information.
What?
Does it have to be educational and direct service?
I will yield to.
Yes, it does.
Do you want
in the direct service criteria?
Representative Rowland.
Okay, this legislation really worries me because I can see groups starting to go just to events instead of the direct services as we see them today. And I think that would be so harming to how our process or how GSSFs work today. And I think it will change GSSFs tremendously in a horrible way. I think the events will start to become the only thing that goes on. And I don't think that's the way how we want to run, but how we want GSSF groups to work if they're going to be funded.
So with this change, will these certain events that are stipulated still have to be direct services?
I'll yield to Ellie Berger.
Oh, sorry, we'll use your question.
Okay, so with this clarification of the bylaws, will these events still have to be tailorable, requestable, direct services?
Yes, and by that then we would not be considered events, we would be considered direct services.
Representative Menino.
Yeah, I would like to respectfully disagree with the representative who said that this conversation shouldn't be about whether more groups are going to gain entry into the GSSF. I think that's really what all of our discussion should be about, is how accessible is this open marketplace of ideas to student organizations, and how clear are the rules being delineated to those organizations. So I'm in favor of this legislation because I believe it does both. It makes things more clear, and it also allows for a wider opportunity for boards to enter the GSSF, because I think we only benefit by having an even larger and more varied pool of ideas in that fund.
First, I would like to applaud your efforts to clarify this legislation, but I would like to say that I disagree that there has been a clarification. I am going to support this legislation though, because I do believe that you will be able to effectively train your GS whatever people in order to understand what this means. But I strongly caution you that once your leadership has passed, this wording in terms of clarity, I do not think this will stand. I would strongly encourage you to move toward positive language in how the statements are made in the bylaws. I think that the inclusion of series of events under direct services, and then this like, what's the difference between an individual event and a series of events? And then you define event as someone reading who's new to this body. That's extremely confusing, and I can only imagine someone coming in from a student organization who say is new to that organization and trying to learn how this works to be able to read this. This is inaccessible, and I think, as other representatives have mentioned, is just part of that inaccessibility of the entire student government to the student body, which makes ASM less relevant. So in closing, I strongly support that we are moving to clarify. I will support it at this time, that we should include this clarification, but I do urge you to think about clarity. And also to, I'm sorry I didn't get to ask you this, but I would propose that the next time you work to clarify bylaws, especially as they would relate to GSS groups, excuse me, I do not know the language very well, that you would communicate with members of organizations that receive your funding, but that don't know the process well, and let them read this and hear first thought, what do they think it says? Because then that will give you that outside perspective, that because you are so knowledgeable and so well trained, you won't be able to access yourself, because you need that fresh perspective in order to understand how unclear this is. So, thank you.
Secretary Cabrera.
I would like to support this legislation. Essentially, as a member of a group who has been formerly a GSSF group, I think it does actually clarify the definitions, and it does open up the possibility and eligibility for student orgs to claim direct services. I do think that there is a point to the fact that these groups will be reviewed in every 2 years. So organizations that do use this will be under review. So I just felt like I should make that clarification.
Representative Lucetta.
I would also like to support this legislation and just comment on a comment that was stated before on how this might change how GSSFs think of events and their direct service, and changing everything to events. And I say that necessarily might not be such a bad thing, because if it is educational and tailorable and everything, and it is in a form of a workshop and event, that might, and it's also repetitive on a series, that might allow more students to come and actually go and participate in these events. So I really support this legislation.
Thank you. Representative Sayers. Representative Walters.
Yeah, I think we're kind of getting at something that's I would try to draw a distinction that I think this legislation is clear, but that this is actually clarifying. I think the problem though is the ones in the fundamental unclarity of the larger system, and that's something we need to work on. We need to really kind of get at that. I think there's also a larger philosophical disagreement that's sort of coming out about this, which is about accessibility, I think we should remember this is the eligibility process. This is the budget process. We're talking about whether you've been eligible to qualify for funding, as opposed to whether you're qualified to have money, or what money you're going to get. So I think there needs to be some clarity, and I think that it's bringing forward a lot of issues about how this process works. But then in this particular instance, this is a limited issue, one that will be beneficial, and so I support the resolution.
Chairman Galli.
I move to call the question.
Second. Question been called in a second. All in favor of calling the question, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, the question's been called. All in favor of passing the event bylaw change, please raise your flag raise. All opposed? I vote 19-1. We will see that next week. Round 2. We're on to the ASM policy violations. So, now we can go on that way.
Sure. As I didn't get a chance to say before because the question was called, I also want to say I hear everybody's concerned about the general authority of the eligibility criteria, and I think that that's something we're going to look for working on. Also, if any of you guys are interested in, that's okay. It's more toward you. If any of you guys are interested in being trained on the eligibility criteria or on what SFC does, I am more than happy to sit down with you and explain it to the best of my ability. And for any of you guys, just shoot me an email if you ever want to grab coffee and talk about SFC or ASM in general. I love chatting with everyone. So that's what I was going to say about that. On to policy violation, the accountability one. So as I started to say before, when I was now supposed to be talking about it, because I wasn't following the agenda, this just differentiates between different types of violations. It adds in more appropriate consequences than what currently is in the bylaws. This one is extremely important to the function and the consistency of SSC. And having to vote down all the consequences. Currently, they need to be voted down by 3/4 vote. So if you have a couple SSC members that feel very strongly about having a more, harsh consequence, there's a chance that the current ones could be imposed, and the 18th Central SSC really felt that those were inappropriate for the violations that were happening. So this differentiates between types of violations. It makes more appropriate consequences. Most importantly, it creates a more proactive way of handling violations. So it allows SFC to sit down with the GSSF that's having an issue and identify what the problem is and write out a plan to fix it. That's currently not in these bylaws, and I think that is really, really important to have some measure of saying, going forward, how can this not happen again? Further, it differentiates between it differentiates between the kind of intentional policy violations, so there's the individual and group. The group is allowed a hearing to present a defense for any possible intentional policy violation, which I think is really important. That we don't have SFC just saying, well, this is what I think. We're just gonna go with that. We take the time to listen to the group and hear what they have to say, ask questions, and do as much investigating to that as possible. It would also allow, if it was an individual intentional policy violation, that the entire group would not suffer because of that individual's choices. So I think that this one is even more so important that this one gets passed.
Okay. Did you open yourself up for questions?
Absolutely.
Okay. Chair Crandall.
Could you explain the importance of the difference between finding an individual and a group intentionally violating a policy?
Sure. So if currently there's no differentiation, it's just an intentional policy violation. If a group incurs an intentional policy violation, they become ineligible for funding for the next 2 years, which can cripple a group. I think that it is really, really important that if you have one member of a group who has, gone rogue and decides they're going to essentially break a bunch of the rules and policies that SFC has, currently, that whole group could lose funding for 2 years. So that would be inhibiting future people who want to be part of this group. That group would not have funding. In this differentiation, if it is just that one individual kind of going crazy, that individual cannot be paid out of the GSSF salary lines, and and their pay line will be frozen. but only their pay line, not the rest of the groups. Whereas currently, if you have a detention policy violation, your entire budget is frozen, and you're not eligible for funding for the next 2 years.
How do you follow? Chairman Young.
Yeah, so having listened to groups who have been fined for non-intentional policy violations, do you think this slackens the rules too much? Because my understanding currently is that if the group does come and present the case, the punishments can be lessened by a 3/4 vote. Do you think this is necessary, or do you think this is just trying to let me rephrase, excuse me. Do you feel that this is necessary? I'm losing my words here. Do you think this is too slack?
No. This is the consequences reflected in the proposed legislation are what we have imposed on groups in the past session, and they've been appropriate. I think also a big part of it is that accountability measure. So trying to be proactive in going forward from a violation and trying to create a plan so it doesn't happen again. That's not currently in there, and I realize that's something that we can do just by ourselves, but I think it's important to have it implemented in here that we're holding ourselves accountable to sitting down with the GSSF and figuring out what the problem is. But I don't think that it's not enough. I think that these are, I mean, anytime the GSSF loses any part of their budget, that's got to suck, because that's money that you could use to spend, that you could spend on serving students or on paying your employees. And if you're going to lose your own salary, then you're not going to make that mistake again. I think that what's in here is more than appropriate.
Do you follow?
I do. So, having talked to GSSs who have been forced to quote-unquote get their acts together due to non-intentional policy violations, do you still think that this new policy forces groups to get their acts together early on, or do you think this just allows them to commit more policy violations before things get serious?
I don't think so, because they build on themselves. So if you have a certain number of the training violations, the punishment increases. I don't think that that's true, because groups are made aware of what the consequences are for policy violations at their training or the authorized center training. Previously, the authorized center training was kind of used as a consequence, like you have to go through that again, and it's kind of a waste of time, because it doesn't really tell you what the issue is, why the policy is being violated. It just reiterates the policy, and it doesn't really help you figure out what was going wrong. But I don't think that, I think that even the lowest consequence is, I mean, it's only writing a written plan for the chair to outline what's going to happen in the future. And I realize that's not like a big punishment, but I think that's something, if your first violation could be a complete mistake, you could have done it completely by accident. Most of the violations are completely by accident. So I don't think that having something very harsh for the first one is appropriate. I think that having a written plan is probably the best, because you can write up a plan and not do it again and never have to have that harsh punishment. So.
Thanks.
Do you have a question? I'm going.
Is this the last meeting before finals?
This is not. I was shocked. Break the secret. Near the end of the meeting, I'm going to let's move out of rules and discuss when we want to go to meetings. We need another one to pass all these bylaws and everything. So there's some answers we don't. We'll not be the last one. Representative Manuel.
Yeah. Why do you feel that SSFC should be able to punish RSOs?
I don't see it as punishing RSOs. I see it as ensuring that student segregated fees are spent appropriately. Most of these, like with the wage policy, it's the policy of the university that students can't work over 20 hours per week and be paid out of university money or segregated fees. If groups are doing that and not, being held to following that, then that's a misuse of student segregated fees. So I feel like the purview of SSC is to ensure that segregated fees are being spent appropriately and to make sure that students' money is safeguarded. I also think it's to ensure that student money is going towards services and not things that it shouldn't be. So I don't like to call it punishment. I like to call it accountability, to make sure that groups are spending money appropriately.
Do Do you have a follow-up?
Yeah, does SSFC have a procedure on determining intentionality?
This creates one. This creates that they're, just go to it, sorry. It says that when a group and or individual is accused of an intentional policy violation, the group or individual will be granted the right to a hearing on the violation in front of the SSFC. The hearing will consist of an opportunity for the group and or individual to speak for 10 minutes on their own behalf, followed by an extendable 30 minutes of question and answer by the SSFC. That's not currently there. Currently, there was not really enough of a process. I think this delineates that. And in the past, I know that groups have been allowed to come and speak and has been asked questions about stuff like this, but I think that it's good to have that measure in there so that's ensured.
Do you have a question?
Yep. Does a hearing in front of SSFC, the same entity that first levels that allegation of intentional policy violation, do you think that lends itself to a fair and open hearing of and determination of a violation for an order?
I believe so, because we are charged with remaining viewpoint neutral. I think that we're trained to make a decision based on what's in the bylaws and not on what we think we're trained to be fair. And I'm confident in my ability to be part of a hearing like this and make a fair decision.
Representative Rowland?
Do you have a definition of what an individual violation, intentional violation is, or a group intentional violation is?
We do not. That's the point of the hearing, is to decide whether which it was, to decide intentionality and which it was. So that's up to the individual SSC member to decide if it was an individual or a group. But we don't have to make a definition for that.
Do you have a follow-up?
Yes. So mostly a group could always have a scapegoat as an individual and blame an individual, so they do not lose funding and the group stays safe while the individual is punished.
I think it's going to have to be extremely clear that it was only an individual's action. And I feel confident that the SSC in the coming session, 10 sessions in the future, is going to be able to look into this far enough to figure out. Usually when these things happen, you can see who committed it, who signed off to buy something, who signed off on someone's hours, who signed something that they shouldn't have signed, all those things. Usually you can look at who did it, and if it's something that was approved by the group, then it's a group violation. It's up to the individual SSC member. There's not a definition.
Do you have a question? Representative Wheeler?
Just as a follow-up to that, do you think that this provides to reprimand more than one individual? If there's like 2 or 3 individuals, but it's clearly not the entire group, do you think that the way the legislation is will allow you to do that?
Yeah, definitely.
And my second question is,
I'm sorry, your follow-up?
my second question is, by what process was this piece of legislation developed?
This was in our subcommittee, so once we get done with all of the budgeting that we need to do, we move into subcommittee and identify problem areas that we've experienced throughout the year. So I think we had 5 or 6 subcommittees, I think 5 or 6 areas that we identified needed work. I know Laura Chukovich spoke to you guys early. This was her project, and I know everyone contributed to it. We amended it when we passed it. So it was contributed to by lots of SOC members, but it was part of our subcommittee projects to identify problem areas and fix them.
Do you have a question?
Yes. It has been mentioned, just as a question, if this hearing process will in any way overlap inappropriately with the student judiciary. Do you have a response to that concern and any approach you would take if it comes up?
Sure. So I think that the role of SJ there would be to ensure that no violations remain in our decision on intentionality. So SJ's purview is to look at our process and say, well, that didn't follow the rules, or that did follow the rules. I think that I guess the responsibility of holding JSSF accountable is that of SFC, and the responsibility of holding SFC accountable is that of SJ. Thank you.
Chair Kidd?
Yes. These fines that the GSSFs are fine. Where does that money end up going?
Into the reserve.
And
Sorry to follow up?
Yes. And what is that?
Oh, so, yeah, it's this big scary thing, no one really understands. The reserve is money that is returned to the ASM of segregated fees. So groups get this budget either, or operations, grants, or any of those things, anything that comes out of segregated fees. Oftentimes with DSSS, they don't entirely expend their budgets, and that money gets returned to the reserves and then is used to offset the segment levy for the next year. It can also be used if there's some sort of emergency or we decide we want to do something cool with segregated fees. We can go to the reserve board and say, here's my proposal to spend some of this cool money. And we can do that every once in a while. It's a little more difficult to get money out of the reserves, which I think it should be because it's money that's been returned. But it's a lot of people like to misconstrue the reserve as this giant pool of money that no one touches and it's just sitting there, but that's not true. It can be used to offset the safety levy or for really great ideas that we have. So.
Do you have a follow-up question?
Yes. So when the hearings called for these violations, is there an initial label given to the policy violation, and then after the hearing, it's either dismissed or like appropriately labeled, or how does that come?
It's either a potential policy violation, potential intentional policy violation. If it is found to be an intentional policy violation, it's either going to be an individual or group intentional policy violation. If it's not an intentional policy violation, it's just a policy violation, and that would fall under our general wage or advertising violations.
Point of information.
What?
When was the last time we took money out of the reserve?
I wish I could yield to former chair now, but I believe it was when we expanded, helped. We heard a case from Student Print who needed to expand their space, and that was it the last time.
They're expanding their space because they have to buy new printers, and those require more space. So they were granted some money to do some reconstruction in the SEC. I think that's happening this summer, so that'll be new improvements.
Okay. And point of information, I'm sorry I'm doing this. I'm just making sure that I have the right idea of what this is. Doesn't the reserve, once the money leaves us in particular and goes to the reserve, can't it be audited by the state and taken by the governor?
I know that it has happened before, and it can, but it's not supposed to be.
Okay.
That's not. But it has happened, yes, in 2016 session actually. All right, Chair Statter.
My question is in regard to the intentional policy violation, and it may be unfounded, so that's why I'm asking. As far as an individual being found to intentionally, let's say in this scenario, take money from the fund, the way it reads to me is that the payroll would be permanently frozen or frozen for the rest of the year. What would stop an individual that, let's say, is graduating or leaving the institution from taking something from the organization, and what would be their consequence in that situation? Or is there any way for SSFC to communicate with perhaps the registrar's office if there is a situation where an individual acts alone and takes perhaps a significant amount of money or other resources? I guess if a scenario like that happened, what can the body do?
For somebody that would be leaving the school, or
fundamentally, I feel like the way the individual intentional policy violation reads is that for that year there may be some consequence, but after that there really isn't any.
So essentially with this, it's that they would be removed from the ASM payroll permanently, so they couldn't be paid by any GSSF. Anything that comes out of segregated fees from ASM, they could not be paid through. So I think, and that would be forever. So I think that would put a big limit on them. I don't think we've seen something happen where a student that's graduating has done something that required further action. If that were to present itself, though, I'm sure that the members of SSC would take the necessary action. I guess it would really depend on the situation for what that would be. I mean, if someone stole something, I think that authorities would be contacted about that, but
There's no process.
There's really not. I think that would kind of be like a case-by-case thing because it sounds rather unique.
You follow up?
No.
Vice Chair Giannopoulos.
I move to suspend bylaw 3.044 to take this and vote on this tonight.
Second. Objection. There's been a motion and a second to suspend bylaw 3.044 so we can vote on this tonight after we have Q&A and debate and everything. So you can speak to your motion, please.
I think that we've suspended the bylaws for every other bylaw change, so I think it would only be appropriate to do for this one as well.
Please speak your second.
Yeah, I completely agree, and this is your option.
Okay. This is debatable. Are there any points to debate? Representative Whitbander?
So no, from all of the GSSF groups that I talked to, none of the members of the groups knew that this was going to be changed or even looked at. So I think that not only highlights a problem within our organization, but I think it gives us an opportunity to reach out to them and tell them that this affects them, because I went in asking if this was something that affected them, and then they were like, why? And I was like, well, it's coming up. And they were really, really happy that they were being notified about it, but they were disappointed that it wasn't earlier and that they couldn't come in and comment about it. That being said, I don't think I don't like going off of precedent in that we've done it for every other one, so we should just do it for this one too. I think that that's a bad idea to set the stage for argument. It doesn't have any standing really or weight. So I think in talking about student interest versus like we just did it before, I think it makes more weight. But.
Chairman Allen?
Not to be personal, but I would challenge as to what groups you're talking to, because as a board member of a major GSSF that had a board meeting today, we were well aware that this was occurring, and it was posted and it was made well aware to everyone at the university that we're deciding on this tonight. I think it needs to get done before we move into summer. That's really why I think we should get it done tonight.
Before you do, can both of you please just try to stick to the motion, which is to suspend this single bylaw, not whether everyone's well enough informed on this. So, Representative Whitbander.
Well, then I'll see you.
Thank you. Seeing no further debate, the question's been called. All in favor of suspending bylaw 3.044, please raise your flag, please. All opposed? By vote 15-2, that passes. The bylaw is suspended, so we'll vote on this tonight. And we're on Chairman Allen.
I would move to close question and answer.
Second.
Okay, the motion to close question and answer in a second. All in favor of closing question and answer, please say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? We're not in debate. I'm going to debate. Chair Crandall?
I like this legislation. I think that it does a good job of separating between the group and the individual, and whether a policy violation was intentional. I think that we've seen in the past year that group personification really harms the campus climate, and I think that we need to recognize this and we can fix this. And I think this is a great way of starting towards that process, and also gives SFC to look at individual accountability versus group accountability, and allows much more of a not an interrogative process, but it allows much more of a process to look at individuals in the group and see what actions were violated instead of just looking at the group as a whole. And I think that's a good process to start. We should continue that process in the future.
Representative Megan.
Yep. So my first issue starts with who it says it's sponsored by. It says SSFC Chair Nybart. She's no longer SSFC Chair, so I have questions about how this legislation was put in place. But I digress. My issue is that